Welcome, everybody. Inside joke. I'm guaranteed to get a copyright strike, but whatever. Anyways. I want to do something to ease into the first few minutes, since it's normally kind of like, you know, let me get this synchronized while I do this. And then I'll do this thing while I do this other thing. And then, you know, it's like, it's kind of boring and everything like that. So I figured I'd take a risk and play Everybody Gets to Go to the Moon. Everybody's going to the moon. It's customary songs like this use a word like spoon. Climb to the silvery. Everybody's going to the moon. I really want to do like a lounge rendition of that song on my own someday. That'd be like one of my dreams come true. Do a nice deep baritone. Everybody's going to the moon. Maybe I should just do it here tonight. Fly to the silvery, fly to the silvery. Everybody's going to the moon. Yeah, everybody's going. Everybody's going. Everybody's going to the moon. Anyways, I just like this song. It's anybody ever see The French Connection? It's a song that plays in the opening, I don't know, 20 minutes or so. There's a scene where Gene Hackman takes Roy Scheider to a bar next door to the police precinct, and it's just really perfectly shot scene where he's like, well, let's just go over there to get a drink. You know, and Gene Hackman's character is a total workaholic, always casing something or doing something, can't ever stop, you know. Even when he's off the clock, he's still on the clock. So he really just takes Roy Scheider over there to case some people at the lounge, and that's the song that's playing in the background. And ever since I heard it, it's been hard to get out of my head. I just love the song. I don't know what it is. It's just this perfect lounge song, and I'm not normally like into like 70s lounge songs, but that one's just so perfect. It makes me wonder why they weren't like a big band, you know. And then I learned that when I started doing more research on like, well, who sang that song? Were they popular? Well, they were kind of a lounge act. I mean, so they were semi-popular, but I wouldn't say they were really broadly known in like on top 40 records or whatever. But it turns out their name is 3 Degrees. Interesting, isn't it? The French Connection, 3 Degrees. Everybody's going to the moon. Yeah. Fly to the silvery. Fly to the silvery. All right. We're 5 minutes in and I'm still singing the song, and I haven't really sang it even, so I'm sorry about that. I've been trying to do some memes lately, so there's just something about like using a dog to like sitting and doing like this, and then I thought about the scene from Magnolia where Tom Cruise's character just stares blankly and says, "What am I doing? I'm quietly judging you." And there's just something about putting that in just a caption with this dog going. It's just, I don't know. It makes me laugh. So if it doesn't do anything for you, that's okay. It helped me out. It gets me through the day. All right. Well, I wanted to talk tonight about space-time laboratories and Preston Nichols and some of the weirdness surrounding that research, because, man, you want to talk about, I don't like, it's not really a rabbit hole. It's a very challenging thing to investigate, because you have to sort of begin to throw away all your previously conceived notions of what space and time is. And really, you're really having to look, you don't have to, but what this information does when you begin digging deeper into it, it challenges what you previously thought of, those paradigms of what space and time truly are. Do they actually exist the way you think they do? And every time I look into these things, I find that they're just shared perceptions. They're really things that have manifested, that we've manifested as a collective consciousness, just like the Earth itself. When you look even like an electrical field of the Earth, right, it obviously has this torus where it goes straight through the center. And I would argue, what does that really equate to? Well, it's the force. The EM fields are creating a force through the center of the Earth, which, if you think about it, that's proof right there. What I'm discussing right now is proof in and of itself that we are existing in a perception. It is not solid. It's being whisked into vibratory frequency the same way that we're processing things internal within our body. When you study energy flow within your body, you'll see energy flow within the universe. And this is the big secret. We're making this together, all of us right now. It's all happening through us, between us. And the more you accept this as the reality that there is no solid matter, here's the problem, folks. What you're going to find is, once you're in that, I guess, echelon, no puns intended, or not trying to make reference to any programs, but yes, there is one echelon. That's a bit menacing, but no, I would say that once you're in the echelons of understanding, yes, the higher ranks or whatever of understanding these things, then you're going to find that you're existing in a stronger polarity, where people don't have subtle perspectives on these things. They tend to have a very strong feelings about freeing the masses from, control of others, or they want to be the ones in control. And there's almost nobody there's those rare ones, mind you, when they do. I would argue, I don't think that those people are, by the way, like when people take the middle ground on these things, I actually think that that's a very, it's actually a pretty courageous position to take, and it's a necessary one to take. Just, there's all things like this within Trinities, folks. So people that kind of just, I was talking about this with somebody before, like within Hollywood, when you start learning certain people are creeps, but then you start finding that they've been next to people that you're like going like, man, that person, I've never heard anything bad about them, and they've always been close to these high-end projects and these producers and directors. And I don't think I've heard a negative peep about them at all, except for some people might say they're dim or crap like that about some of these stars or whatever. But there's some of them you don't hear them say like, they're negative or they've done horrible things like some of the other ones, even though they've always been kind of near them. And I would argue that that's a pretty challenging place to be in, because, once you're that close to the eye of the storm, I guess, then yeah, you must know that if you go full bore, you've witnessed oftentimes what happens to the people that go, and you just say, hey, I'm exposing all this. That's not really a safe route for you sometimes, and for a lot of the people around you. It's not the easiest one. I would argue there's safety in all these routes. There really is, folks. There's your own safety depending on what your requirements are. I would say for the material that I've taken on, that I'm exceptionally safe. That's the thing that I've learned. That it's one of the reasons why I have such a strong faith in people to this day, that they really haven't let me down overall. And I believe in them so strongly. And this is when this research really began to kick in, that I understood this whole thoughts become things thing, and believing in people and what it manifests. When you believe in somebody, it's a little bit of a handshake. You're always keeping the door open for that person to improve or be better or be more understanding or see things your way more. The minute you begin to hate them and cut them off, then you're also cutting yourself off from the potential of building a bridge to somebody that you may have built an ally, or become allies with, or may have come to a greater understanding with. And so what I've learned to do is sort of accept sometimes that there's going to be some people that want to enter my life because they don't like me, or they want to enter my life because they think that I'm something that I'm not. And I've sort of allowed that at certain times. I'm trying not to do it as much as I used to, because it's become more harmful to me individually, as I've been stripped of resources. When I have more resources, though, I really don't mind taking those risks, provided I know that I'm always going to have a somewhere to fall if I need to. And so far, guys, I mean, I've taken some considerable risks where I placed myself in some situations where I let people have a considerable amount of control over my life, and they abused it immediately. And that's kind of what they use me for, is to find out sometimes, are these people going to be considerate and kind, I think, or are they going to be manipulative and abusive? And I have to tell you guys, in more recent memory, I've had way more good experiences with people than bad. Most of my negative ones were when I first spoke out. There was these constant attempts to rug sweep my perceptions to where I would get to the point where I was fatigued. So I want you guys to know this. The more aware you become, there's going to be more attempts to fatigue your spirit and fatigue your ability to trust people. Sorry, this is a little off topic, but I want to say this before I get into the material. They're going to fatigue your sense of truth, and they're going to fatigue your sense of like what's true and who's false and everything like that. So if there's times, guys, where I'm kind of like challenging some of the pre-existing paradigms that you've come to accept, or characters or people, I do understand sometimes you're going to get angry at me. I understand sometimes that you're going to get pissed, and you're going to want to disconnect from time to time. And I'm just telling you guys that the same way I've had that reaction to others, I open the door for others to have that reaction to me sometimes, and still say, hey, that's fine. You could have been pissed off at me. You may have even said a few cross words at me. I'm all right. I have thick skin. It's okay. I'm used to it. I understand. This is the realm that we're in. This is the material we're dealing with, where it's so challenging. We're dealing with master manipulators. So I don't know what to accept as truth, except that I learned over time that taking the Robert Anton Wilson approach is kind of a brave way of doing this, where I can maintain my personal integrity, but also have a Robert Anton Wilson maybe existence about everything, to say, like, guys, I really don't know 100%, but I'm willing to challenge existing paradigms. I'm willing to challenge what we've been told prior in ways that are meaningful and will actually address the issues as they are. It's just that some of these things most people really don't want to have revealed. And I've learned this is for some good reason. There's a little bit of what's going on right now that I'm revealing, folks, where some of the people that might be inclined to help me don't want to, in some cases, just because it's a little bit of a you had to play the game unless you're going to get eaten by it. And I don't think these people wanted to participate in certain activities, but they were pushed into a corner and backed up against the wall. And they learned that if they don't, then they're not going to survive. Their families won't survive. And so they've learned to adapt. I think that's totally forgivable. And I think that that's something that we're going to have to make allowances for if we're really going to bring things down to a peace level in this country, that quite a few people operated in a gray area for a very, very long time because they had to. And, if you understand what's going on right now, this is why I say, guys, I've had people that I knew straight up lied to me, but I don't hate them. And I don't permanently disregard them, even if I was disappointed with them for a while. Once I reviewed everything critically, I asked myself, if that person weren't a trained liar, could they have ever gotten that close to me in that particular case? This is years ago, guys. I don't want anybody thinking this is about them right now. Even that person, I learned that once they had time to spend with me, initially, I think they were inclined to go along with the narrative and the scripts that they were given. Hey, this person is a masterful liar. Get him. And then once they knew me and they understood how pure I am, like with my expression, when I'm near somebody like that, I'm like that. I'll just be like, what do you want to know? What would you like me to talk about? It's just who I am. I want to make sure people feel comfortable and they have any concerns that they have are put to ease if I can ease them, and if I can't, then I'll explain, why the situation is what it is. And I won't try to talk them into something, but overall, I've learned that some of those people later on regretted how they harmed me or the ways that they had lied to me. And so I found that was a much more powerful way to create bridges to people that were incentivized to harm me, is that sometimes I have to, not in a rope-a-dope sense, but in a rope-a false karma. How about that? I'm trying to rope the false karma. It's not rope-a-dope. It's not the person's fault that they're attributing false karma. What I'm trying to do is get them close enough to me to where they'll understand that there may be a degree of false karma attributed, so that they'll understand that I'm a good ally, I'm a good person to be around, and that I'm not trying to find like some miraculous middle ground of everybody. I look for, number one, solutions that nearly everybody can agree upon and that are issues that are of relevance to everybody. And that's just going with the flow of water. That's just understanding that the human spirit is driven by what's inside our internal bodies and minds. And that's 60-70% water. That's what makes the ocean go. That's what makes all these things go around in circles the way they do. So, right. That's the nature of life. And so we have to keep adding building blocks to that within our belief systems, as well as in our daily activities. And this has become the challenge with COVID. People's daily activities have been remaining static and frozen via this outbreak. All right, fine. We can have different varying opinions on what it is, how it manifested, but the reality is it's had genuine effects on people's ability to be mobile and get around. And it's genuinely harmed our economy exponentially. And it's caused a lot of individual people an enormous amount of suffering. If for no other reason than it's made them static. It's caused them to be completely stuck and they're not able to get around like they used to. And these are fully functioning people that had jobs or got to go different places, or, at least had some degree of daily routine that gave them some peace. Not in every case. I think some people actually wound up liking it. That's what was a little bit scary about this all, guys, is that I'm learning over and over again. And again, I'm not sure how much of this is just social engineering, but you keep hearing the narrative out there that all these people, they can't get them to work. I have to be honest with you guys. If somebody just handed me a car right now and said, you want to work 40 hours a week, I'd be happy to. What happened to me was, it's bizarre how these things happen, guys. I mean, I'm not a lazy person at all. Although I do think I have better things to offer than doing people's deliveries or, whatever you want to say, or, going to work in a restaurant. I mean, I have things that I can do outside of that. Those are good skills to have. But let's face it, guys, I'm thinking of some pretty high order things here. Is that really what you want to use me for? And again, it's not work I would ever be ashamed to do. I've done it many times in my life, and I would be proud to do it again. It's good, hard work. It helps, it feeds people, it keeps their, whatever the case is, dishwashers, all those things, man, they're all respectable jobs, and I don't shun any of it. But I'm also, it's bizarre the way this all happened, guys. So I don't want to get into my personal situations excessively, except to say that, it's strange to me that right now, some minds right now that have the ability to do amazing problem solving in this country would be subjected to just being kind of like passively pushed to the side and said, yeah, we don't really need you right now. And I'm like, really? Are you sure you don't need me right now? Here I am offering my help over and over again. I literally walk into the front doors of some of your offices, including the FBI, offering help. I don't go in there with a protest sign calling them assholes either, guys. I start by offering my help and assistance. And then I learned that, well, sometimes there's assholes in there that I should have gone in with a protest sign for, but touche. Would that have helped? Even if that was what should have been done, if you think that's what should have been done, would it have helped? No, it wouldn't have done anything. And let me explain something to you. That wasn't my intention either. I actually went down there thinking somebody might actually be receptive to what I had to say. So. And maybe it's taken some people time to understand, because I don't believe that everybody there is has issues. So. All right, guys, let's talk though about the core topic here. I don't want to delve into blah, blah, blah. I know, if you're not familiar with me, you didn't come here to hear me talk about that. You want to talk about Montauk, Philadelphia experiment, all that stuff. All right, cool. Or unless you want to go to the moon. No. All right. What got me into this part was I was doing research at the Defense Intelligence Agency's report called Controlled Offensive Behavior. And at the same time, I was also reading Preston Nichols' work. I always screw up the title of his book. It's called the Montauk Project, Experiments in Time. That's the one that I initially read. And what really impressed me about it was he would, in between his narratives, which you can accept or not accept it because they are a little bit off. What I mean to say is Preston Nichols, and maybe I should put up a slide here to show you what I'm talking about. As long as I have slides available, I'm going to do this. And then I'll play a video from this where I talk about this material exactly. But that's the book that I'm going to be discussing tonight. I'll show you some excerpts from it too. And what impressed me about Preston Nichols, and you can find him on many different places on YouTube. He had a thing called Space-Time Laboratories in Cairo, New York. Yeah, spelled similar to the way, Cairo, Egypt. He was in Cairo, New York, which is super interesting because when I researched the location that I knew he was at, he was stacked up against a whole bunch of these like mountain peaks that I know would be like powerful energy sources. So Preston Nichols was, in a way, in his own small way, tapping into something. And he was kind of a Wizard of Oz, guys. I hate to break it to people, but and I don't mean it in a negative sense. I mean to say that he was doing so many esoteric, strange experiments near that land, and he was doing it close to a mountain range. And I do think that this created some significant space-time, I guess you could say, anomalies. That there is something where Preston Nichols tends to have an alternative perspective on history. He tends to remember certain parts of history relative to entertainment industry with an alternative narrative. Now, when I was initially exposed to this material, I think it would make me kind of go like, well, why would his story be so different than the ones that are in the books? And then as I began to decrypt the ones that were in the books, I'm going, oh, maybe guys like him aren't as insane, or this part of his story wasn't the 50% false and the other part 50% true. Maybe some of this guy's story was actually not just there, because guys, sometimes people do that for good reasons. Okay, it's there to protect themselves, and it's kind of like a code for people to, like, they get the download, they get the right information, which is they really just want you to research some core data in the book, and then they surround it with this weird sci-fi fiction that, everybody will kind of go like, okay, whatever, that's a junk book. And then to the person that actually knows what to do with it, they'll go, this isn't junk. There's a lot of good information in here. And that's the way I looked at it. And I didn't even think that it was perceived as junk, to be honest with you. I think a person that actually has a radio frequency background would find Preston Nichols. I think if you ever did anything in film, music recording, videography, especially if you're a ham radio operator, public, things about public safety, or you did any wireless tower design, people that have any kind of radio frequency, CB, you would find this probably fascinating based on the things that you understand about channel numbers and megahertz and that kind of thing. You would probably enjoy the book just because it taps into that part of your brain like it did with me. And then there's all the other parts where they just delve into what really happened out there. So if you think this is just some guy telling some stories, no. There's actual documentation that I downloaded from the Freedom of Information Act library on the CIA.gov's website that will back up many of the things that are discussed relative to this project, names and data that's relevant. And so hang on really quick here. That's something that's making my nose itch like crazy. I'm sorry. It's like something flying into the wind through the, what do you want to call it? The All right, here it is. During one of several absences, Colonel Pellegrini paid me a call. He mentioned was an Air Force project, which I understand involves a research contract with blank of that company apparently is knowledgeable of the project and perhaps in charge of it for the company. The project seeks the same objective as Rainbow. It involves an investigation of the phenomenon first observed, I understand, in connection with missile development, that an ionized layer around the shell of a vehicle greatly reduces or eliminates electronic reflectivity of the vehicle surfaces. In the case of missiles, the ionized layer is essentially heat generated, but the possibility of generating it from a power source is being investigated. The great advantage this technique is believed to possess is that the ionized layer is non-frequency limited in its effect. Accordingly, if each layer can be established and maintained around any vehicle, the protection covers all frequency ranges. The quantitative effectiveness of the protection with respect to such variables as range, power, output of the radiating set, and ambient conditions of atmosphere and temperature are among the matters still under investigation as a means of inducing ionized layer. You may have rejected this development in the early stages of Rainbow, in which case no attention to this note. If you have not, I wonder if it would not be desirable for you or blank to find out about it, to talk to more of the technical people who are working on it. I have a note to the effect that Colonel Israeli at the Weapons Guidance Laboratory is more fully informed of this than Colonel Pellegrini, but I believe the latter would be the proper point of entry through which to obtain access to the knowledgeable officials and clearances to discuss the project with them. Unless you feel such exploration would be a waste of time, I will ask that blank regard the contracting officer's copy of this memorandum as a request to start such investigation after discussing with you, Richard Bissell. And you'll find Richard Bissell's name on a lot of this documentation. So this is Rainbow investigation document right there. I have another one. Actually, I think I have this one listed under Westinghouse. Yeah, here it is. All right, concurrence and amendment number 2 to contract number BE2022 with Westinghouse Electric Corporation, Project Rainbow. This memorandum contains a recommendation submitted for approval of the project director. Such recommendation is set forth in paragraph. Anyways, I don't want to make all the legalese here, but it says, provide for studies and investigations of the probable effects of changes of certain variables. It's right here in case you're wondering. Of certain variables on the operation of special systems for producing electromagnetic radiation. Amendment number 2 to the letter contract has been drawn to extend for, All right. Since the Westinghouse Electric Corporation, down here if you look, since the Westinghouse Electric Corporation is a reputable contractor and has shown considerable interest in the project, the termination provision is considered as a contractual precaution, which very unlikely would be exercised by the contractor. What's really weird about this, guys, is the fact that these documents all involve Westinghouse. 222nd, if it seems like I'm reaching, I don't know. When I know about timeline manipulation, I don't think it is reaching. I think that these are actually codes that were designed sometimes for timelines, because all of this involved, Rainbow was timeline manipulation. Rainbow was Looking Glass. It's all the same thing. All right. So I'm going to give you an article on video here in a second that'll help explain all this. Everybody's going to the moon. Yeah. Fly to the silvery. Fly to the silvery. Welcome back. All right, here it is.
Book by Preston Nichols, Peter Moon, and
sorry guys, the audio's off. Hang on.
welcome back.
There it is. All right.
Okay, this is part one, where we're going to talk about the connections to some of this data and how it correlates to the Montauk Project. It's a book by Preston Nichols and Peter Moon. And the reason why I want to reference this book is because he makes very specific references to Wilhelm Reich's orgone energy experiments that took place decades ago. And it's very relevant to things that are happening today, because it was studying a field that wasn't really defined clearly yet, called psychoenergetics, or just plain energetics, depending on your preference, I guess. This kind of ties into the Navy's experiments on the USS Eldridge, where they were trying to test cloaking technology using radio frequency. And so I think this book is worth just reading. Regardless of your opinion on the material overall, it's a very good reference guide as far as the specific frequencies, to try to help understand maybe a little bit about how I came to some of the conclusions that I came to, because it's just another reference point for me to say, hey, I read this book, there's some truth here, I'm seeing some of these things myself, and this is me basically explaining the correlations I'm finding to some of the data that Preston Nichols presented in the Montauk Project, specifically how it relates not only to Montauk, but also the USS Eldridge, and what's known as the Phoenix Project, which is different than what people associate with now as the Phoenix Project. Oftentimes, I think it's kind of considered sort of like a mercenary project that was in Vietnam, and that's not what this is about specifically. This is related to something completely different, involving radio frequency. So getting back to this slide really quick, honestly, this part here really isn't that big of a deal. I just kind of wanted to highlight this part here, that it more or less demonstrates that during the Cold War, you had the U.S. government and USSR really keeping an eye on one another and constantly worried about what the other one was going to do research-wise. They were always trying to keep up with one another. So paragraphs 1 and 2 are more or less from the perspective of the USSR and how they saw their own research and perceived the U.S. And as I discussed in my last intro, that there's a lot of people that studied the Soviet Union's psychoenergetics program and the research they were doing into telepathy, and were very concerned that the U.S. was far behind. And so I just think this demonstrates that this was a mutual concern. So they were doing a lot of research as far back as not just 1972 when this report was written, but well before that. So I would just encourage you to read through this on your own. So how does this all tie into today in real time, what we're dealing with now? Well, first, the book specifically, the Montauk Project, deals, I want people to kind of take a quick pause on this. If you have the book available to you, I would encourage you to take a look at these specific passages if you can find them, okay? Look into these pages on the book. And if you'll notice here, you'll see I just did a search by MHz for megahertz to see what I could find in relation to data that I found and located myself. I do research involving spectrum analysis. As I've told some of you, I'm a radio frequency engineer by trade, so I'm familiar with how to use a device like this that measures frequencies like these here. So, for example, a lot of times you see people on the internet saying, I've measured really strong EMF. Well, that's good, because that's energy, right? That says that you're seeing this spike, okay? But that's all it's telling you, is that you see the energy of this. It's not telling you that it's this, right? You might get this level right here. It might tell you how many decibels is within a certain range. So you might get, it's like it might peak out once it hits like 30 dBm, for example, or 40 dBm might be a threshold for reaching like a really high level. And then 73 might be more of a medium level, and then 100 might be a completely low level on the EMF meter. But see, that's all it's really telling you, is based on some numeric value that's pre-programmed within that EMF meter, it's just telling you that it's strong or it's not strong, strong or it's not strong. And that could be coming from anywhere. That could come from your cell phone, your Wi-Fi, your Bluetooth, your laptop, anything. So my recommendation is if you're going to perform these type of measurements, shut everything down, right down to the breaker level before you do anything like this, if you want to call this type of data. That's my recommendation to all you people who want to replicate this and using one of these devices like an RF Explorer 6G spectrum analyzer to see what you can find on your own. But I would encourage people to try to replicate this because, and I would say you can do it with both these devices. This is really cheap. This device here will only run you like anywhere from 20 to 40, 50 bucks US, depending on your options and what kind of antenna or other type of things, like a little remote control if you want to. It's lots of different ways you can go. And then this here runs probably closer to between like $350 to $400 when it's fully optioned. And it does perform really nice spectrum analysis for a relatively low cost device. And so just to give you an example of what this looks like. So these are the signals that were associated with, I know I'm bouncing around here guys, but bear with me. These are the signals that are associated with the Phoenix project. You notice here 403 megahertz. This is my measurement here. You can kind of get a relative look here how it correlates. Kind of see there it's around like a neg 40, neg 30, kind of spiking all around there. That's pretty strong. Now, I'm suspect of this, so I just want to make sure people know that. I really feel like this requires further verification from somebody just because this is kind of odd signal behavior. I'm not sure if I should trust this. There's some harmonics going on here. It just looks bizarre to me. So then you have this signal here, which I generated, which if you want to see what it looks like live, he basically talks about how these radiosondes were sending out these sort of pulse signals, and you can see through here he actually talks about pulse potential scalar, 7 megahertz is coupled, 1680 megahertz oscillator. Okay, see this? And he actually discusses the signal behavior. So I would say that if you're a person who maybe has a background in ham radio, amateur radio, I would really encourage you to look into this. And for those of you who are curious what this might look like in real time, this is a quick clip. I should say this is, it's not quite real time. It's set to max. So that just means that it'll, wherever the last peak signal was, it'll maintain that until a stronger signal comes in. That's a generic, guys. I'm not trying to like be super technical here. So all you RF engineers, back off. I'm not gonna play tech games here. Okay. This is just, this is for all audiences. Okay. So, anyways, try to bounce around. I don't know what's going on here, guys. So this is an example of a radiosonde. So what you just saw earlier, that signal behavior, is indicative of a device like this, okay? Now, the premise of the radiosonde, if you read the book, is that they were sending these things up in like weather balloons, okay? So I've measured signals. The one you just saw there was right on the neg 70s and everything. That's inside my home. You know, that's in building and everything like that. I've actually found that same signal in other parts of my home around like neg 55, which is quite a bit stronger. Now, if it's a weather balloon, it should be quite a ways up there, I would think. And these devices, I wouldn't think would generate that much power. But if you notice here, there's your signals, right? See how it says MHZ? So I'm not sure what to make of that. I'm just kind of throwing that out there, okay? And but this is my research, and I can actually show you many more slides and many more spectrum analysis that I've done. I have a very large database of these things, but I just don't want to bog this down with too much technical data, so we'll move on. So getting into telepathy and UHF. So why is this important? Well, UHF Actually, you know something? I think I'm going to save this for another section here. And yeah, we'll move on to this one. So anyways, we'll pick up on part 2 very shortly, telepathy and UHF. Thank you. Excuse me. All right, hello. Just wanted to throw this in here as a supplement. I've done these measurements before, but this is done a little bit differently. So I'm using this software called iRF Explorer. It's designed for this device that I'm using, which is the RF Explorer 6G. It has a frequency range, as you see here. Well, at least this is the one setting right now. There's 2 different radios in it that it can receive with 15 to 2700, and there's another one that handles that upper 5.8, or rather 5800 megahertz in that range. So these are my settings. You can see how I have it configured here. This is to cover the 1680 megahertz band that I discovered that Preston Nichols talks about. These are a little bit off. I don't know why. Anyways, it seems like there's slight differences when you use a software spectrum analyzer compared to the hardware display. So we'll just go over here to this, and then you can see what this looks like live. So this is 2:30 on Monday, February 27th. And this is what the signal looks like in Estacada, Oregon. I've noticed this signal just seems to get stronger and stronger. And there's a correlation to an antenna mast that was raised about 2 houses down, where they're housing some public safety equipment. There's also a yard directly behind me where I can see an antenna poking up between the bushes. Again, this is sort of up on a hillside, so these people might be doing communication systems and things like that. But I guess the thing that I find weird about this is that public safety would be more like 150 megahertz, close to that range. We're in that 400 to like 410 to 490 megahertz, I guess. I mean, not exactly that, but somewhere in the middle there is the various different ham radio bands. And so, if they're like doing public safety, like emergency services or fire services or police services or whatever, typically, not always, right, because there's a lot of different bands they use, but I've seen those like with mixes of 150 roughly, 450 roughly, not an exact number, but they call that like public safety bands. And then I see them using these 700 and 800 LTE bands that are allocated specifically for public safety sometimes too. But I've never heard of anybody in public safety using the 1680 to 1683 like I'm seeing here right now. And like I said, it just gets stronger as they raise the antenna masts. And so, just to kind of give you an idea, and again, this could be for any number of reasons, but this is what a live spectrum analysis looks like. And thank you. All right, welcome back. This is part 2. So continuing off of what we learned from the last part, and you'll want to have this report open, and I would recommend you sift through pages 25, 26, and 27, because that's what we're going to be covering in the DIA Control Defensive Behavior Report. So now what I'm trying to do here with this second part is to sort of bridge the gap on where this whole Montauk narrative bridges into the research that was done during this time. And so before I do that, it's important to discuss the Phoenix Project and Project Rainbow. So in the early 1950s, the Phoenix Project was merged with the remnants of Project Rainbow. The Phoenix Project was to delve further into the study of electromagnetic effects and their use in achieving stealth technology. The problem the Phoenix Project faced was how to keep this new technology from having such an adverse effect on humans involved in the experiments. The director of this new phase of the project was Dr. John von Neumann, brought back to oversee operations. He concentrated on the metaphysical side of the experiments in an attempt to determine what had gone wrong. He and his team worked for about 10 years on the problem, studying why humans had such a problem with intense electromagnetic fields, especially ones that were capable of producing the sort of effects seen in the Philadelphia experiment. What they found was that the human beings are born with a time reference point. This time reference point is linked to the electromagnetic fields native to the Earth and help orient man to the nature of the universe and how it operates. So those who are familiar, this would be probably one set different type of frequencies in relation to what I think that most people refer to as a Schumann resonance at 7.83 hertz. That's my own interpretation, and I believe that is discussed a little bit by Preston Nichols in some of his material, but I would have to get a refresher on that. But I'm fairly certain that this is tied into the Schumann resonance, what he's discussing here, for those who study that. And so to get back to this, it is a separate entity distinct from the physical body. When the generators were started on the Eldridge, the link to this point was severed, causing the crew of the Eldridge massive physical and mental trauma. So as a result of this electromagnetic burst that severed the connection to the Schumann resonance, this is sort of what caused the trauma. And actually, the more I think about it, yes, that was part of it. It was actually related specifically to the Schumann resonance. So it was determined that the devices used in the original Philadelphia experiment had created an artificial reality around the Eldridge. Thus, the ship had removed from the normal plane of existence, rendering it invisible. The problem was that the new reality had no connection to our world, thus disorienting anyone within the field. In order to overcome this problem, a time reference point linking any potential inhabitant of the electromagnetic bottles created by the Project Rainbow technology back to their point of origin had to be developed. This problem was solved by giving the bottle a phony background, a false Earth to link to that would reduce any form of transdimensional disorder. A computer was used to recreate the time reference points of specific people and to generate a false electromagnetic background that would give the physical body something to lock onto. If this system failed, the physical and the mental body would separate, resulting in insanity. Now, I know that sounds very science fiction, and this story, I think, has always been kind of held on the fringes just because it just seems so unbelievable. But what I hope to demonstrate here by the time we're done with this presentation, which is going to be a little bit longer than the other couple that have been preceded it, is that you're going to see why this is relevant to now. This does connect to today. Okay, so, but just to finish this up, this phase of the project was completed in 1967. A report was then sent to Congress stating that the human mind could be altered by the use of electromagnetics. Very important to remember, okay? With development, one could create devices that would change the way people think. Congress, fearing the results of such experimentation could lead into mass mind control, refused any further funding for the project, and in 1969 ordered that the Phoenix Project be disbanded. So these are just some devices that are kind of showing you like an evolution. So this is from Preston Nichols' book right here. And if you can actually freeze on this and zoom in, and I can actually provide a link to this someplace, and you can actually better yet, just the Montauk Project is probably the book that you can find this actual document in and see this up close. So there's that. This is something I took from a YouTube clip, a screenshot I got from an actual manufacturer in modern day times. This is somebody that you can purchase this equipment from that's specifically related to the same purpose generally. And again, the whole notion of this is involving sort of weather balloon communications. Okay? And this falls within the frequency range that I've measured. So, all right, so now that we've talked about that, I need to do a little bit of background before we dig into the actual report. So, in order to have this discussion regarding telepathy and ultra-high frequency, we have to actually define ultra-high frequency. So, I don't want to get into too many like numbers and everything, but just so you have this as your notes, 300 megahertz to 3,000 megahertz, or what is equivalent to 3 gigahertz, is what's considered ultra-high frequency, UHF. Now, the key parts to remember is that this is involved for most, like in the United States especially, this is television broadcasting. So your television, when it tunes into a channel, it's in the UHF band. Cell phones, my own, the industry that I come from, all is operating in the UHF band. And 90% of the equipment that I use to operate in that UHF band and that I have experience with is within UHF. And that also includes satellite communications, which I guess is in that 16 to 1700 range. I think somewhere in that range as far as, or 1.5, 1.6, 1.7 gigahertz. There's different slices within that range, okay, that covers that. Then you have personal radio services, personal radio services, including Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. You're talking about 2.4 and 2.5 gigahertz, which would equivalent to 2400, 2500 megahertz. And you got your walkie-talkies, cordless phones, tons of things in this band, basically. Okay, so what this translates to is nearly everything you touch every day that has a wireless signal is UHF. it's an important thing to remember as we're discussing this overall theme, because remember what they were dealing with here. They were talking about space-time manipulation, creating manipulations of time, creating perception, manipulation, and ultimately mind control. And they were trying to study how these things were not only useful for weather modification, but also for mind control. Okay? So now we need to also discuss cybernetics and hive mind, because these things tie together. Because ultimately, when you're talking about a mass population mind control system, you would want to exploit what's called cybernetics, or a hive mind, or the collective consciousness, or the collective intelligence. So the way to look at this too is that, within that collective consciousness, really it's sort of like a network with nodes, and it's exactly the same way that other computer network nodes are. In fact, most technologies, the more you drill these issues down and you start discussing the more esoteric and hidden things regarding human consciousness, you really break it down to realize that technology isn't an evolution so much as it's a de-evolution. All it can do is mirror the way humans already interact with one another on an energetic level. We have spheres of influence, okay? That's what the collective consciousness and collective intelligence is, but there is a network map involved, meaning there are nodes that pass along messages to other nodes and pass along messages to other nodes, and it works like a tributary system in rivers and lakes and oceans, okay? That's cybernetics and hive mind. And so in order to master this realm, you would have to have all the critical data points to understand how energetics work, how people's energetic influences affect one another, and that would involve very specific DNA, RNA data, and also having a master of the domain over radio frequency. Every single part of our human body interacts with frequency from the top down. You can find ELF, UHF, they all play a part, whether it be telepathic communications, whether it be behavior modifications, whether it be light frequency and how you perceive light. All of these things fall within the spectrum, okay? So electroencephalography, EEG, sorry I butchered that, and then there's magnetoencephalography, MEG. So these are two terms that I just want you to sort of maybe take a pause, read through this. Just a quick little snapshot of this. EEG is electromagnetic, whereas, as electrophysiology, and then magneto is more mapping magnetic fields, and with magnetometers. Sorry, that's a mouthful. They use these things called squids. This is getting into a really technical conversation that really isn't appropriate here, but these are terms that you're going to want to become familiar with, because when we're talking about measurements, how do you make a measurement of one's brain activity, or how one has a PK or psychokinetic potential? What are the mechanisms in place to measure it? What are the numbers? This is how they achieve the measurement of these numbers. Okay, so not everybody has access to this equipment. That's important to remember. So let's just get into the materials. Now that we have some background, okay? So telepathy and ultra high frequency, according to this report, starting on page 25, if you want to follow along. It says that they were developing labs for monitoring, testing, and studying telepathic communications in the Soviet Union back in 1962, and that in 1963 they ran a test between two cities in Russia that ran a distance of 1,200 miles with the aid of a ultra shortwave radio transmitter. Remember, UHF, ultra shortwave radio transmitter, ultra. Okay. So, as a result, the doctor was convinced that his experiments and those he conducted jointly with the Brain Institute offered scientific proof of telepathic communications. His next goal was to identify the nature of brain energy that produces it. So I didn't want to get into brain energy and this sort of the psychoenergetics aspects yet, but that's going to be important later to start thinking about bioplasma, psychoenergetics, Wilhelm Reich, orgone, and even maybe a little bit a little bit of Royal Reich, but I don't necessarily think it's relevant to this discussion right away, but those are some people you might want to start reading up on. And then, so getting down to this though, it says, so theorizing on the above experiments, one Soviet scientist suggested that telepathic impulses are radiated along the lines of bits of information in a cybernetic system. So remember what we talked about earlier, a nodal system, a cybernetic hive mind system that they can exploit when it's already existing within nature. What's at the root of the flower of life? What's at the root of human energetics? What the Egyptians know, what a lot of the mystics know, this all sort of ties together. What you're seeing with our technology is a mirroring of occult wisdom and what natural human energetics are known about but are hidden from most people, I believe. That's the hypothesis. So another scientist is known to be working on the idea of the time as energy, speculating that telepathic transmissions may be propagated through a supposed time energy system rather than through the electromagnetic field. So I think you could be saying that what they're talking about here is making an argument for scalar or longitudinal waveforms, but it wasn't really that well understood. And that's why it's important to understand Wilhelm Reich and his studies, because they relate to bioplasma, biocommunications, and longitudinal waves and scalar energy. This is why these things are all sort of merging into this cohesive narrative here, where you're seeing how this information has been buried for decades. So it says the Soviet research into biocommunications phenomenon does not appear to be earthbound and limited to inner space, but apparently extends to outer space as well. So they were doing telepathic tests, and they realized that you could pass telepathic communication when they were outside of the Earth orbit. And so you have to wonder why that is. Is it perhaps that modern technology, modern communications equipment is inhibiting some of our abilities? Because if they're operating in the megahertz or the UHF waves, then perhaps what we've actually done with our technology is intercepted natural communication in place of, inorganic radio communication that replaces natural waveforms. It's something to think about, right? Because there has to be an explanation for why some people can do things that are psychic and others can't, or things that are in that realm. So continuing on, though, it says there are reports that the Soviets are training their cosmonauts in telepathy to back up electronic equipment while in outer space. One of these backup schemes is known to involve coded telepathic messages. This method was previously demonstrated in March 1967 when a coded telepathic message was flashed from Moscow to Leningrad. That is mind-blowing when you think about it, right? So moving on to part 7 here, it says there are numerous reports on Soviet applications of clairvoyance, hypnotism, dowsing, and military operations. In the case of dowsing, this is also not unprecedented since U.S. forces have employed dowsing in Vietnam for locating enemy tunnels and caches. With respect to brain and mind control conditioning, a recent report indicates that the Soviet Union has made great strides in emotional training and conditioning. Soldiers are being taught to get their own emotional tone in battle and stress situations. Remember this, guys, because there's ways that you can beat these things, because they train people to do this. So there's hope. Further, astronauts are being taught through such mental conditioning to distort time and to offset boredom in outer space. These all sound a little bit outlandish, but when you start placing the data in context of what we know so far, what we know to be used today, it starts to add up, right? Just saying. So we'll keep going. Okay, now this involves animals and various responses to stimuli. So man's sight and hearing are limited to a relatively small range of wavelengths. Other living beings often possess much wider perceptive abilities, both with regard to sharpness of perception and range of stimuli. For example, dogs hear higher sound frequencies than man. Bats and dolphins orient themselves by means of an ultrasound radar. Bees perceive colors in the ultraviolet part of the spectrum. Some snakes perceive minute differences in temperature and orient themselves by means of thermoreceptors. Certain living beings even react to stimuli in which man is absolutely insensitive. Okay? So, we're dealing in an environment where spectrum is being used on such a broad scale and of all varying types. We don't even necessarily understand just how much this potential hiving, I guess, and replication of natural bypassing of communications is even playing a part within the animal kingdom, things that are non-human, right? Animals, dogs, cats, whatever it might be. Certainly, if they're doing tests on humans, they're going to want to see if they can crack an animal, because an animal won't be able to fight it if you think about it. And if you're doing like remote viewing, remote action, and you can get a cat's brainwave measured, for example, or a dog's brainwave measured, and that's all it takes is to have their EEG data of their brain mapped out, then yeah, you could probably see the visual cortex of a household pet, and that could be the hack. It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. So it says here at the bottom, says such application and control could be used in the detection and identification of animate objects or humans through brain wave interactions, mass hypnosis, or mind control through long-distance telepathy. Thermal receptors and sensitivity to changes in magnetic, electrical, gravitational fields. Right? According to the observations made by Dr. Montague Ullman during a trip to the Soviet bloc countries in the fall of the 1970s, Soviet biocommunications investigations are effectively combining the use of modern and sophisticated technology with basic pragmatic approaches. This was evident, he states, in their approach to long-distance telepathy experiments where the results were analyzed in physiological EEG, that's what this is, electroencephalographic. That's what I showed you earlier in that slide if you want to go back to it. So EEG data as well as psychological task performance, the transmission of data in Morse code. Check that out, right? Because that's relevant if you're studying Project Scan8 and projects that involve like remote viewing involving GPS coordinates and map coordinates and things of that nature. Dr. Ullman further observed that the Soviet researchers seemed intent on confirming the existence of a new form of energy referred to as bioplasma, which they maintain is characteristic of life processes and represents matter in the form of an integrated system of elementary charged particles. Such energy, through interaction with other systems, is thought to provide the basis for biocommunications. So this is the workaround. It's the scalar, the longitudinal, it's the orgone, it's the DOR, POR concepts that you hear a lot of people talk about in more, I guess you could say, fringe circles of science that's being studied. So getting to the next part here, it says the above commentary documents a clear case for research in the Soviet Union and parapsychology. It is significant because of the energy and resources being allotted for this work in the Soviet Union and because its military implications, especially in mind manipulation and controlled offensive behavior. You know, this is AKA mind control. I don't know what else you call that. The more sinister aspects of paranormal research appear to be surfacing in the Soviet Union. Why else would a Soviet researcher make the statement, "Tell America that the psychic potential of man must be used for good"? I think that's important to remember because, you know, one of our friends from the Soviet Union at that time during the Cold War was trying to reach out to us and tell us to please, please, please let us know that psychic potential of man must be used for good, because they were studying these things and they understood it very well. And they know the danger of what can happen when it's being abused. So just to wrap this up, I want to, like I told you, I was going to try to bring this all full circle. So is this sci-fi universe that we're discussing in the 1972 becoming a reality? Well, you tell me. This is from Wikipedia involving synthetic telepathy research. I'll leave a citation down below or a little quote thing that you can click on to get to this if you want to read more. But it says in 2002, Kevin Warwick had an array of 100 electrodes fired into his nervous system in order to link his nervous system into the internet to investigate enhancement possibilities. So he uploaded his data, his EEG. That's what electrodes, you know, like they have these little, well, I can't say that is specifically how they did that technique is, but it's sort of like taking an EEG and then taking that data pattern and then sending it to the internet, okay? Allowing the AI or the central computer or whatever it is to reroute his brain data. With this in place, Warwick successfully carried out a series of experiments with electrodes, also implanted into his wife's nervous system. They conducted the first direct electronic communication experiment between the nervous system of two humans. That was 14 years ago. It's 2016 today. Excuse me, that was 15 years ago. It's 2017 today. Okay. So research into synthetic telepathy using subvocalization is taking place at University of California, Irvine under lead scientist Mike Desmura. The first such communication took place in the 1960s using EEG to create Morse code using brain alpha waves. As we discussed earlier in the other article, this is just some verification that happened. And then the part that I really think that we can leave this with is on September 3rd, 2014, scientists reported that direct communication between human brains was possible over extended distances through internet transmission of EEG signals. Now, that takes that 2002 study to the next level, because when you really get down to what that translates to, the EEG process is all it takes to create a unique signature on your brain. Now, or a MEG, right? This combination of data. Now you have a unique signature on your body, your brain. You're mapped. So what they've determined is that they can effectively map out all your energetics, your frequency sets, okay? Map it out, transmit it to another person across the internet. Pretty mind-boggling. Sounds like a sci-fi film, but there you are. That happened. And if you want the citations for how that was done, there you go. The links in the comments section below. But so we're talking about how this all translates to UHF and why this is relevant to telepathy. Well, because you have to think about, since we have a multitude of processes that exist within human bodies, that all involves frequency. Some involve things like ELF, right? So you've probably heard like the pineal gland and your alpha, beta, theta, gamma states, right? I'll get into that in another article, by the way. So that's not for this one, but it's relative to this though, because that's one waveform, or not waveform, but one set of frequencies or whatever that you're being used for that specific aspect of your brain. But see, there's other resonant frequencies within your body. Now, I don't have that map specifically. I've seen a lot of different data on that. It's all varying. It's not always consistent. For example, I see that 10 hertz is listed as an alpha state. But then I've seen other studies that said, well, that's for a lot of people, but not most people. And for some people, it's close to that, but it's not precisely that. So for some people, 10 hertz might be their idle alpha state. I've heard that people that have stronger psychic potential tend to idle closer to 8 or 8.25 in that range. I've seen all kinds of studies. So I guess what I'm saying, though, is that it's worth discussing. But when you think about this in terms of UHF, all of these studies that we were talking about earlier, right, in this DIA report, now let's go back a little bit, they were all talking about this here, telepathic experiments involving UHF. Okay, please, now think about this, okay? UHF. So we're talking about studies dealing with UHF, and now today, like I told you, all right, now today, everything we use basically is UHF. Everything. Your cell phone, your television stations, your Wi-Fi, your Bluetooth, your GPS, it's all UHF. And that's what back in 1972 they were proving out, and their experimentations were responsible for telepathic communication. So what I'm trying to hypothesize here a little bit, or at least present as at least a reasonable notion when we discuss the idea, even though it's a loaded term, of mind control or frequency influence, if you want to call it that, there's plausible data here to suggest that these things have happened, and we wouldn't even been aware of it. I think that there's a possibility, a very strong likelihood, just because this is human nature, that a lot of people do understand this intrinsically and are exploiting it. But I think there's a lot of people, like, for example, I was in the wireless industry for 20 years, and this is news to me. I'm just now thinking this through a little bit and going, wow, yeah, okay. Now that I know that they were studying telepathy, like, back in 1972 and even the late 60s, and it involved UHF frequencies. And now I understand how some of these interactions involve psychic telepathic communication, and there's little interactions between these plays of frequency, and especially when it comes to human energetics, then yeah, I have to ask myself, are these things, having an effect on our natural telepathic communication? So if these things are, then what are other things like infrared, ultraviolet, ELF, extremely low frequency, super high frequency, right? Satellites, and start getting into like microwaves and gigahertz. So, and we'll get there soon. But again, like I said, this could be hours and hours, and I really just want to make it digestible. We're going to start talking a little bit more into this whole bioplasma realm and connect to things more like in Carillion photography and how that all relates to psychic phenomenon, energy signatures, things of that nature in the next part. I really appreciate everybody listening to this material, because it's taken a long time to come to these conclusions, and not conclusions necessarily, but to at least come to a reasonable hypothesis that can sort of, I think this helps validate a lot of the data that a lot of people have been discussing for years. And it just, once you get the right assembly of information together, you can start drawing correlations that make sense, and maybe we can start coming up with some solutions to correct some things that might be going on. So part 3, we'll start digging deeper into Carillion photography, bioplasma, and everything. And again, thank you, everybody.
All right, folks. Well, I didn't necessarily want to just sit here and play control defensive behavior as a presentation the whole time. That's not the point of tonight. But it is important to have a couple of those presentations out there just as the prerequisite core of the material. And no sense in just trying to like repeat everything that I've already done with slides a lot better than I could just sit here and go blah, blah, blah. So All right. So I did kind of cover how that gets into some of Preston Nichols' books a little bit, but I think what I might wind up doing here is actually kind of stepping you through some of the more compelling chapters. Um, they're really good books, but those who are unfamiliar, I mean, let me look this up really quick so I can get a basic background here. All right, this is the USS Eldridge wiki entry. And you notice here it does have a thing for the Philadelphia experiment. So again, always kind of quick to say that it's theory or something like that. The Philadelphia experiment was a purported naval military experiment at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, sometime around the 28th of October, 1943, in which Eldridge was to be rendered invisible by a cloaking device to human observers for a brief period. Due to lack of evidence for the alleged Philadelphia experiment, the confession of Carlos Miguel Allende, well, how interesting, who started the myth and who admitted that he had made up the story and related to author Morris K. Jessup. Wow, dude. Now, I never read this. Holy shit. Holy shit. Wow. I don't think you guys understand what I'm just like, I'm processing something big here. Because nearly any time there's a significant cover up between guys, how else do I say it? Child trafficking and electronic weapons and space time manipulation are nearly inseparable. The people that are the most high ranking, like of the more deranged occultists, their interest in children is all about the San Miguel de Allende region. And so that's why this is like tripping me out. San Miguel de Allende is in Mexico. I never really thought much about this. I don't think I ever really read this. So I'm kind of like, I'm processing it in front of you here. This is really weird because to me, this seems like a bullshit lore. Carlos Miguel, guys, no. If you knew how much information I have on people from San Miguel de Allende, this would like make your jaw drop. That because that's everything, guys. The Montauk thing, a lot of times, this is where it gets sinister, guys, because there's the real Montauk Project. There's information relative to that. Then you got this other form where it means moan, talk, and there's oh god, dude, it gets dark. I don't want to talk about too much of that crap right now. But they nearly anytime there's something like this that they want to cover up, they create some perverse, corruption or inversion of the original data set and then apply it to something more menacing and disgusting. That way they can get away with talking about this while they're actually talking about the other. So to be clear, guys, I'm not doing that. And when I just located this, I'm kind of like, wow, now it's making sense why a lot of the times where I was digging in this material, I'm like, why does some of this seem a little bit creepy and like it's speaking double speak? Yeah, some of it was. And that you're going to find that close to a lot of these types of issues, folks. Just letting you know, I'm not doing the double speak, okay? And if you have questions about like you want me to name specific things, I mean, I can. I'm just not sure how far you want me to take it. It would almost be a lesson here in all of itself. But to give you a quick rundown of something like why that's relevant, because see, that's why I'm calling bullshit on this story. Let's take a look at let's do the Oma. No, Uma? Oprah. San Miguel de Allende. Carlos Miguel Allende. San Miguel de Allende. Carlos Miguel Allende. San Miguel de Allende. Carlos Miguel Allende. Okay, all right. Sure, guys. I mean, I guess Miguel Allende might be a common thing. That's possible, but seems a little too coincidental in this case. So I kind of call bullshit on I call bullshit on the call bowling bullshit on it. Something to that effect. Because usually they have all the narratives covered. You know, the original bullshit one, the person who calls bullshit on it, and then the person who calls bullshit on the bullshitter. So I don't know, man. Who knows what to think about anything? So I'm doing my best here to piece it all together with you know what's available, folks. What can I tell you? But that's why with that last report I showed you, that's why I gave that to you, is because whenever you go to Wikipedia, you always wind up with this shit right here, and you go like, I know there's more to this. This is nonsense. This has got to be somebody just doping this. Yeah, it is. That's all this is. But it's interesting to me that the whole point of this is that it's supposed to be rendered invisible through a cloaking device, right? A cloaking device is a hypothetical or fictional stealth technology that can cause objects such as spaceships or individuals to be partially or wholly invisible to parts of the electromagnetic spectrum. Yeah, okay. Sorry to be geeky. However, over the entire spectrum, a cloaked object scatters more than an uncloaked object. Fictional cloaking devices have been used as plot devices in various media for many years. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, guys, it's all fake. There's no such thing as cloaking technologies involving electromagnetics that they've experimented with going all the way back to the 40s and 50s. Sure, development and scientific research show that real-world cloaking devices can obscure objects from at least one wavelength of EM emissions. Scientists already use artificial materials called metamaterials to bend light around objects. Well, hell, guys, like I said, all roads lead back to SAIC. You know what I have here? You love this shit. Oh, man. This is why I really do think that what we're dealing with today is just an extension of covering up all this space-time manipulation and timeline technology. And I think the lab that pretty much has tapped into the most of it, and it's logical, guys, because they have been close to all of it, would be SAIC. So I'm going to show you some excerpts from Robert Guffey's book. There's a reason why I tell people constantly you have to read Camelio. It is mandatory reading if you deal within the realm of any of the type of topics that I talk about. I consider Camelio by Robert Guffey a very, very important book. Okay. There's hardly any books I feel that way about. Hang on. There we go. No, I didn't ask, but he did mention something about that. Okay, hang on really quick here. So this is like an interview between, let's see, S is the, G, all right, G is Guffey, the author. DF is Dion, his friend, I think. And then S is Schoengert. Okay, Schoengert is definitely one of the people that was, what do you want to call it? He's a real person, guys. This book, even though it's kind of like based on a true story and nearly true story, they had to change some things. This interview in the back of it's a real interview between a real guy that experienced some strange things involving cloaking technology. And you even see down here at the bottom, they even cover this topic. It says, the next day on 3/12/2006, Richard Schoengert sent me a follow-up email in which he confirmed the corporation as Science Applications International Corporation, SAIC. He then went on to report, in my archives, I also have some correspondence that I conducted with the company over 10 years ago. And so there is another person there. She says, Schoengert says, yeah, you know, I just thought of the name of the company, SAIC. SAIC, yeah, you'll find them, I think, in the directory unless they changed their name or merged. No, they're there. I think they may have stolen my idea. I really do. Okay, what Schoengert developed was cloaking technology, just like what they did with the USS Eldridge, but Schoengert's wasn't on that large of a scale. I think Schoengert was doing it with smaller containers and things like that, like not like more of like a what do you want to call it? Nothing like large scale like that. He had a different variation on it. And then he says, I know for a fact. And then it says oh, wait, hang on. He says, the reason I think that is because I had a meeting with the guy from SAIC, and it's been about 7 years ago. So again, guys, this is at least one other person who says that SAIC steals intellectual property and keeps it for themselves. They'll try to have a meeting with you, and then they'll pretend that it's theirs. Hell, you know something? Try being raised next to a person that got 6 years of training from these goons. Then welcome to my world. Yeah, now we're doing it so much near the same time frame that legitimately they might claim they came up with it independently, and it's possible. But I have the patent on it. He's talking about his cloaking technology. This is Schoengert, the guy who invented it for real, and they stole it from him more than likely. He says, I have the patent on it, but now it was brought out to me by the patent office that there are patents that are classified and they're not in the public domain. They've not yet been released. They're reserved for the military, and it could be very well that SAIC has that kind of patent pending. It's called patent pending, a release from the military, because you cannot have a secret patent. In other words, you can have a secret patent pending, but when you file a patent, it's put into a public book. The patent office issues a book, and so it cannot be classified at that point in time. So if the military is using things, they cannot do it in a clandestine atmosphere that's protected by U.S. patent laws. In other words, the military is allowed to use anything they want, but they can use my patent if they want to. They have the right to use my patent. However, if a company starts producing cloaking systems, that's where I can step in and sue the company. Yeah, you see, I think, and Schoengert says, I cannot sue the government. And then DF says, you can't sue the government. That's because they have the right to use any patent in the world. They have unlimited use rights on patents, but that does not mean they can manufacture and sell them. They can't do that. They can't manufacture and sell them. So what they do is they usually go out and get a company to develop and manufacture something. So that's when you have to step in and sue them for patent infringement. Yeah, and that's in the paper I have here, which is the Future Warrior Project, or the Objective Warrior Project. Oh, yeah. DF says, did you ever talk to a Captain Jean-Louis Deguay? Yeah, or more. Let me think back. It was more than that. Actually, it's been 12 years ago. DF says, my goodness. Schoengert says, yeah, 12 years ago, I met with this guy. And around maybe only 10 years ago, I met with this guy. It could have been 12. But anyways, we met in a restaurant here in LA. He works for SAIC, or he did at that time. And I've got all the records on this meeting. Great. And he was amazed that Dr. Schweitzer and I, my associate, Dr. Felix Schweitzer, and I had come up with the same things that they had been working on in isolation. He said, quote, it is amazing that you've come up with much of the same things we have. And then I explained to him that I'd been in contact with Dr. Thomas Hafer back at DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. And he said, yeah, that's the right person you should be dealing with, Dr. Hafer. And so we had a lot in common. He was telling me about what they were doing, that they had a contract with the Army and that they were doing things with the Army. But then later I wrote a letter to the president of SAIC, and I suggested that we enter into some kind of mutual collaboration group and that I could license them because I have the patent rights. And I got a letter back saying something like they would consider this and get back with me, and that was the end of it. Then I sent a follow-up letter and I never got a response. So I came to the conclusion that these people were already doing it. That's SAIC in a nutshell, you guys. You know, they'll just take it. These people, then Guffey says, these people sound like vacuum cleaners. They come in and they suck up information. DF, yeah, and they just go. Only a few hours before Randy's lecture began, I found myself sitting in a Mimi's Cafe in Costa Mesa eating dinner with Melinda. We were discussing Richard's research into invisibility technology. I told her briefly about Dion's experiences in San Diego. Now, guys, Dion is a guy that was basically targeted by people that have like SAIC type deep state lab things, and they turned his life into a science fiction novel. They made him experience the most bizarre, invisibility things where he could perceive space and time differently. Like, you would have thought the guy was losing his mind. And that's the kind of things they were doing to him as experimental technology. So that's what kind of piqued my interest about this, is because he seems to have been a target of SAIC, just like all these other people. They all seem to get SAIC, which is CIAS backwards, in case you're wondering who owns it for real and who they're really doing work for. They're a cancer in this country, in my opinion. They're absolutely toxic. Every time they get close to something, they turn it to shit. They've done it to the NSA. They've done it to the FBI. They've done it to pretty much every infrastructure they've touched. They are about as Nazi as you can get when it comes to just effing everything up in America. Yet they're trusted with everything. Bizarre, guys. Now they have our space program through Dynetics and Leidos. It's tripping me out, guys. Why are people in our country trusting these assholes again? This book came out years ago, and that hey guys, now that they fucked up our information technology and our information systems, all of our internet pathways and all of our phone number systems and brainwave technology, what else can we give SAIC? Invisibility cloaking without having to pay for it? Sure, let's line up and just take it in the butt. Yep. What are you guys doing, man? Is anybody alive out there in Washington, D.C.? Are you guys all really taking it from this company this way? How many hours of material do I have to give you telling you about all the nefarious deeds, the thievery, the intellectual property theft? I mean, they're stealing from the real innovators in this country and you're rewarding them with multiple billion-dollar contracts. What the fuck? Schoengert is an innovator. Can we get real here? Schoengert's an innovator. That's a scientist. That's a person that deserves to be elevated and revered in our society. But guess what we're doing? We're delivering billions of dollars to this piece of shit, worthless CIA front company that does nothing but shit on real innovators, real inventors, and the real brain trust of America. Why the fuck are we letting these people do this still? Why? Someone please explain this to me. Someone explain it. I want to know. I want to know why we're so disconnected where we let this shit happen repeatedly. How much evidence do you need that this company is absolutely toxic? You don't understand what they're doing yet? It is all about them. They are destroying this nation from the inside out and selling us to China, in my opinion. You think they're helping America? These are the assholes who lied to get us into the Iraq war. Then they gave themselves an award when the guy that lied to get us into it told the truth suddenly. Yeah, let's give them an award for journalistic integrity. I can't remember what they did. It is just insane what these people do. And we all keep going like, but they gave him an award, but he was on NBC. Oh my God, guys. You know what we need to do? When we talk about solutions, man? You know what we should do? Someone needs... And let somebody, really guys, we need to go and get one of those great big projection monitors that's mobile, like they drive all around Las Vegas to advertise for fucking casinos. But we'll do Full Metal Disclosure with it. And we're going to take this billboard and just like take it to like the entrance of where SAIC is and go like, let's just play this show all day where we just talk about all the projects like, the virtual case file at the FBI, Trailblazer, Thin Thread, all the defense related projects that they fucked up that have cost us intelligence failures. You know something, guys? When you cause intelligence failures at the FBI and in the military, you know what else you cost? Hey, assholes. Hey, SAIC, do you know what you cost? Soldiers' lives. Intelligence agencies' lives and Americans' lives. You're responsible because of your mishandling. And it's funny, guys. All I have to do is criticize this company, and after like not talking to me for years, one of these goons that used to work there would suddenly be like, I need to talk to you about something. I don't care about you otherwise, but now you're talking about my employer that I was at for 6 years. I have to have a conversation with you. What you're saying isn't very nice. Sorry, guys. I had to go there briefly. Trying to be more dignified than that, but I mean, shit, guys. Do you know what it's like to deal with people that are like that, like in your face fucking lying to you about shit like this? They will straight up look you in the eye and go like, I don't know. One of these people knows about a child molester and hit him, and then I asked her where the hell he is, and she just goes, who knows? I go, oh, you don't know? Can you tell me? Because you seem to have his home address. Tell me when you got his home address. Who knows? Oh, okay. So you don't remember? Can you tell me like within 5 years, like roughly when you got it? 85, 90, 95, 2000, 2005. What year? I'm curious. What year did you get his address? Who knows? All right. You got a shitty memory. I understand. Maybe you just don't know when you got this child molester's address that you could have reported. What decade was it? Who knows? Guys, this is the family, just so you know. So if you're expecting something different at the governmental level or at the military level, you know what I have to tell you? Who knows? Because that's what they're going to answer you. That annoying too. And they're doing it to piss you off. And I promise you, I'm not doing it, but I hope you're motivated through that slight bit of anger to finally go, something? We shouldn't wait anymore. These people are full of shit. Yes, they are. They are full of shit. Take our country back, please. I will help explain how you do it. I don't care anymore. Just please, let's get it done. Where you want me to be. Just tell me. I'm there. Because I'm tired of this. I want our country back. Tired of these fucking goons. How do we fix this? Because they have their hands in everything. There is nothing they don't got their hands in. All of it, you guys. Every wireless tower in America, they've got their little right there. Every information path on your internet. Guys, you're blaming like, you know, who you're going to blame? Who's your internet company? Frontier? You know, you don't like Cox. You don't like Time Warner. You don't like Verizon. You don't like whoever. I got news for you guys. There is fuckery that goes on behind all of those companies that they have zero to do with. That all leads back to here. The same people that are stealing Mr. Schoengert's cloaking technology. Then going, I don't know. Oh, did we file a patent? Geez, I don't know. Oh, you gave us a presentation a decade ago. Gosh, you think I don't know where that comes from? All of you who've encountered SAIC? God, it almost seems like people close to me run the fucking company. Oh, wait, where did Buffer CEOs come from? The same place it came from in Hollywood. Albert S. Reddy, producer of Godfather, whose name is not Albert S. Reddy. That's a Buffer. But you know, the real person, they'll make sure to throw their name in the middle of it. But that's a buffer for the person that actually funds them and finances them, because the real producers are kind of making the shit. It's really their manifestation. The Godfather series especially, because that's really just a code for underground uranium mining and the power infrastructure relative to where they have the mines. So if the plot line's talking about like their casinos in Lake Tahoe, they've got underground facilities under Nevada. That's why the Godfather family moved from the East Coast over to Nevada, because it's all about the casinos. And then they got all the casino interest out here, just like the real family. But anyways, you got to pretend, though, that you're, you know, like humble workers there, right? When you were working at old Mirage, Treasure Island. I work there. I don't own it. Just so you know, guys, I never played that game, but I know why you would think that I did. Because everyone around me kind of has that going on. Oh, really? Who owns that? Not me. I'm middle class. And they're not. That's why I'm telling you guys, Jeff Bezos, buffer. He's a buffer, guys. He really is a buffer. He's just there to cover for the real people. It's true. So. Yeah. Anyways, I got to finish reading this interview because it's important. I did not mean to take that long of a personal break, but I'm just so sick of these assholes. And you're not wrong, Tracy. The problem is the simulation is effectively been created by them having control over all this information. Do you understand that? They can create this fictional reality by having access to every internet protocol address, every phone number, every call waiting phone number forward, every prefix, every area code, every international code. Do you get that? I mean, I don't mean this. I don't mean like, you get it. It's not like that, Tracy. I don't mean it like that to you. What I mean to say is like, this is how much they have control over all of these things. Like, can you imagine, like, if you had somebody like this in your life that had this much control over, think about it. This would be like having a partner, okay, that says, I get to read every single piece of mail you get and decide if it even makes it to you. If you get a phone call, I'm going to see the phone number as it arrives, and I'll decide whether or not you get to talk to that person or if that person ever even knows that they called you for real. See, this person that's got it into your life now can make these decisions for you. Then on top of it, all right, when your IP address is associated with your phone or your home internet, not when these people have control over your life, they can reroute that under a thing called the tool lie IP system to where, well, they can just have their friends line up on your internet connection and do all kinds of things to it that you wouldn't approve of. How would that work? Well, it would work to create misperceptions about you, wouldn't it? While they all sit around there going, right, bruh, you piece of shit. I hate these people. I really do. I've got such contempt for them, to the point where I can't quite hate them, just so you know. It's just deep, deep resentment. If I hated them, it would be an energy attachment. But I have deep resentment for their bullshit. They completely destroyed our country. And I know where it leads back to. The man behind the man behind the man behind the throne. Not always a man, by the way. It's definitely equal opportunity there. Trust me on that one. Tracy, you would not want to stay in the Pyramid Hotel. I think it has negative energy. But if you wanted to stay in there and actually measure the negative energy, it might be worth a shot. Putting it in context. Yeah, here's the thing though, Tracy. I mean, I'm not making this assessment of you, but if you buy into what you're saying, then let me explain something to you. You're giving these people permission to manage that energy, and they're not the ones you want to give permission. See, that's like having Stockholm syndrome, to say that SAIC should be the people that decide which one of us have abilities that deserve to be in the quote real world. These people don't deserve to be in the real world with everybody else, if you ask me. People like me are completely safe. Everything's been turned upside down, where they're the ones that are the arbitrators of psychic ability, and you do understand that. These are the people that are the gatekeepers for everything involving space-time manipulation, Stargate Project, Grill Flame. They held over 90% of the information, and I've read through all of their research, nearly, that's available. Let me put it this way. If it's available and I could find it by looking for their names directly, then yeah, I have it and it's downloaded and I've read through it and I've reported on a lot of it. And they're behind nearly everything that's fake. Every time you see something fake news or fake whatever, it's always SAIC faking it. And they're covering up all of this. And so there's no way in hell you're going to convince me personally that those people are in the right when it comes to hiding who has abilities or getting to decide which one of us get to be out in the public. That's a lot of horse shit. That's something I will never in a million years accept. They're the ones that need to be put into timeout, not us, them. They're the ones that fucked up, and they're the ones that have been elevating fake people into these Stargate projects, that have been giving disinformation to the military. And that's one of the reasons why we've had so many fuck ups. They intentionally supply false data, something that I would never do intentionally. That's what it pisses me off about these people. They are known for doing it. I can say that publicly because their track record is clear. Look up David K, David space Kay, maybe E. I don't know if it was spelled Kay or Kaye. Lied to get us into Iraq. I mean, I'm sick of these people. It's just, it's tiresome. I'm telling you. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, Tracy. I'm not saying, but I know that I'm on the right side of this. That's all, because I'm the person that opened my heart up and my abilities to the military directly. And, guys, if you think that's something that the average person would do, well, you tell me if you know somebody else who's at the age in their 40s, they would go into a military office knowing that they would probably laugh their asses off looking at a guy that's got this much pepper in his hair, volunteering to join if they want me. Turns out they don't, but they do. That's what I think happened. They're like going, if he's in the military, we really can't use him for what he's most valuable for. That was the thing I learned. See, it took some time for me to figure it out. That's when I think somebody, like, there was this long pause while I was waiting there, for somebody to come around and talk to me. And then just something about that moment that said to me, like, even though I left, I felt like that's when it all happened. That whether or not I was or wasn't, that's when somebody was like going, something, let's just see if what he's saying is all right. Because if you think about it, guys, if the FBI has truly failed in their capacity, well, let me put it this way. What would happen? Let's ask, guys, we need to ask this as a question jurisdictionally, because this could happen. What if some foreign government just knew and guys, I'm not making some threat. This is not some veiled threat. I promise. Okay. But what if somebody just targeted like all of the field offices of the FBI to cripple our federal law enforcement simultaneously? What if that happened, right? Where there was a catastrophic event. Let's just stop saying that it was a foreign government so that we take all the menacing things out of it. Let's just say there was a catastrophic event in America that caused like 80% of the FBI's field agents to be down because they were all in their offices when something happened, right? But the military was intact and had a solid intelligence gathering within the Army. Who would take over jurisdictionally within the law enforcement capabilities at that point? I'm asking this as an honest question, guys, because we have something within space-time manipulation and things that are going on with this strange technology that's very, very esoteric and not many people could understand. And again, it took me a few years before I was even honestly confident enough to bring that to people's attention publicly beyond what I did here inside the Controlled Offensive Behavior Report, because now I understand that we're dealing in something that's very, very hard to wrap your head around, because you have to completely change your concept of how we experience time. And you have to open yourself up to the idea that, yeah, a person right now from this year or next year might actually be sending you information in a way that you don't entirely understand how it's getting to you, but you know it's getting to you. So should you listen to it every time? Because people on all sides of the fence have this technology, not just good people. Very negative forces have this technology. In fact, I think that too many negative entities are using this technology, and multiple ones have it. And this is the problem. It's turned our world into a chessboard that should not be black and white duality, first and foremost. And now, instead of two chess players, there's all kinds of people going like, well, I'm going to move a piece, but it's my turn. No, 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 it's my turn. It's like, it's none of your turns. Get the fuck out of here. You're all dealing in something you shouldn't. Stop. We're not chess pieces. The earth is not a chessboard. And this is where the problem is. They're looking at it that way. They've perceived it that way, and they've gained reality that way. And it took me a while to figure this out, but I've been experiencing it pretty aggressively since, I'd say, at least 2012. That's when my world just went completely weird upside down, and it hasn't gotten much more normal since. And people around me were behaving differently too, to the point where I blame myself. I sought treatment, you guys. This is what pisses me off about people near me. I'm the only person that thought maybe something's wrong with me. And I actually went and saw doctors and things like that to say like, hey guys, I think something's happening here. And I don't know, I don't really want to believe this. And maybe it's me, and maybe my head's not right. Or could we talk? Really? I did. Which is ironic, guys, because then people near me will be like going, he needs help. And I'm like, you motherfuckers need help. I'm the only one that actually got verified. And they said, nah, dude, you've got a high level thinking brain. You could just process like the shit that most of us aren't even thinking about. That's what every psychiatrist or psychologist or therapist winds up telling me. And they're like going, well, I know it must be difficult having that many things going on in your head. So if you want me to prescribe you something that'll slow it down or make you fall asleep or something, I'd be happy to. And I go, no, that's okay. I can accomplish that fine on my own without pills. I don't need to do that. If I really want to, there's things I can do outside of medication that can achieve that. So no, I mean, and nobody ever said that they suggested it. They just said that if you want something to help you, like if you're thinking too much, that's like, I don't think it's a bad thing. So I just have a very active brain, and it doesn't really slow down. And that's, I'm not the kind of person that needs a lot of sleep, and I don't stop thinking. You're just going to learn that. Anybody that is around me, they'll learn that quickly. I've been like that since I was a kid. And again, guys, that wasn't a new phenomenon. That wasn't anything that started in 2012. I've always had abilities, and I've always had things going on. It just wasn't made clear to me my relevance to the overall picture until I'd say about a decade ago. And these things are being told to me, but I was going, get the fuck out of here. That's not a thing. That doesn't exist. No, you're lying. I don't believe you. Stop it. And so that's how I would get, and but anyways, guys, I was trying to bring that whole point up to say that what would happen if the FBI did lose all their agents and all their field staff. I think that you would have a point where they would have to ask for help from the military and other intelligence agencies, right? What would you do? You would just find a way to make it work, would you not? Can we all agree, guys? Because there has to be something that you must be prepared for in the event that something like that happens. Now, I offer that to you as a more peaceful way of presenting it rather than it being like a foreign government attacks. But sure, all right, let's transition over to that idea secondary. Number one, let's act like sinkholes open up and swallow up a bunch of FBI offices. Then you got to like, okay, how do we do federal law enforcement now? How do we get all these problems solved? Who steps in? Again, guys, I would argue that you need to have a plan in place for something like that, because psychoenergetics can create something very similar within human behavior. It won't be a physical sinkhole. It'll be a mental sinkhole relative to the location. And if you think they can't completely swarm entire areas with energetic events that change behaviors, you are wrong. That is where my research is 100% solid, and I know it's good. I've done so much research and infrastructure everywhere in this country practically. Well, look, guys, there's only so many places I've been, but I've been on both sides of the country. I've measured it. I have proof of my footage where I measured it, what I was finding in different places. I don't care if I was in hotels, houses, or condos, or weekly stay hotels, or it doesn't really matter, guys. I found this in so many different places, okay? You can create psychotronic events that can make a whole bunch of field agents change their behavior. That's all I'm explaining to you. So you've really got to be aware of that and understand that it's a possibility, and it's a realistic possibility, all right? Well, here's the thing, guys. Look, I think that things can be done. It's just getting more people to understand what you can do within prayer, meditation, as just a couple examples. I mean, again, there's a reason why the people encourage you to pray. It's weird. I used to think that that's a stupid and weak thing to do, and now I understand that the reason why you have so many people trying to push our knee-jerk kind of fight flight response over and over again is to prevent us from getting the metaphysical work done. And that's best done when you're in a meditative state, a prayer state, or an orgasmic state, where you're actually doing positive orgone radiation emissions, and then doing thought concentration exercises in tandem, that are actually thinking in terms of what you would like to see and envision as a perfect reality. And if the more that people can kind of understand that, if you can begin by saying, okay, let's all just sit down and think about what would we like to envision as our perfect future, as the reality we would like to structure together. And then it starts when you start doing the focused concentration exercises. I think, like that's one of the reasons why I like playing from Valery Uvarov's channel, his Project 12 thing that he does, where he has like that huge concept of all like the 33 pyramids out there, and having learning centers and healing centers that are things that are all life affirming and that aren't harmful to the human body, and then places that actually encourage people to think differently, encourage people to think non-linear if they already do. I mean, people that think in a more linear way, they have their place and they're fine. I appreciate that. We need to have a balance of perspectives. What I've observed though is there's a lot of people that learn in ways that are more abstract, and they're labeled with, quote, learning disabilities, that I don't think that they really have disabilities. I think it's a way that our culture defines certain people to disadvantage them when they're actually hyper capable. I think that some of the people, in fact, that are considered within the autism spectrum are actually hyper capable in a lot of ways. And what nature does is it's constantly creating evolutions where they take certain elements from you, but they give you others. It's strange. I've just observed this, guys. And I think it's just because physical reality relative to metaphysical is changing. The metaphysical is actually beginning to change physical reality. And so people are being birthed with less materialism embedded in them. And that's part of the characteristic traits of some of these things that are called illnesses. And again, not all of them have positive ramifications, but I think it's the way we're perceiving them in many cases. I think that if you notice that a person is born without the need for materialism, that might be a response to our culture. It may be DNA's way of speaking back, saying they're trying to create more perfect perspective people who disregard materialism, who think more metaphysically, who don't get distracted by the minutia and the mundane. And you'll observe that by a lot of these people. They're just thinking constantly, and they're solving problems on their own in ways that most people on the outside don't understand. And you know something? I just think that you should let that be something, let it be, and let it thrive, and find ways to make it work. And don't mislabel it as something that's to me, like, they should be people that you're really giving like selective learning environments because you want to see them thrive, because they're going to be able to do things that others cannot do. And so when you change your perspective on that, just this one example of one group of people, you can, that's just one way that you just reprogram reality, because nature's doing that. There's too many things right now that people are so obsessed with the physical reality that they don't seem to understand how much it's anchoring them and preventing them from accomplishing things that'll change that in ways that they personally would be happier with. That's all. And, you know, I wanted to talk about this material relative to Preston Nichols for this reason, guys. Like, the guy has such an alternative picture on the way certain historical events happened, like Music of Time. I'm going to show you guys some excerpts of Music of Time. And that's why, like, guys like Preston Nichols, if you ever study him, speaking of like autism spectrum, I don't know where he was, okay, on these things, but he was a unique personality. His socialization wasn't like other people's. I wouldn't say he was that awkward, but he wasn't a normal socializer. You know, he was very, very much into what he was thinking about purely, you know. And so when I was looking at his interviews and looking at his research and everything like that, yeah, I mean, he has some interesting characteristics and some personality traits, but there's no questioning when you go through his data and his information that he had to have known something. He had to have known something very, very significant, you know? Yeah. ETA says that you think that prayer brings about scalar waves. Sure. Well, what is HARP? Can we agree that HARP is a scalar device? Correct. All right. So let's put it into perspective. If HARP is a scalar device, then let's take a look at what HARP is. Because I want you, here's all I'm trying to get you guys to do is, yes, what you're saying, perfect. You're thinking along the right track. Okay. I'm not bringing this up to be like all, ooh, HARP. I mean to say that, yes, HARP works, it bends plasma. So why are they interested in it? Because it's replicating a human process with an extra factor of amplitude. That's all, guys. So yeah, it develops scalar waves, and so do people. So all this is doing is it's restructuring things with high power amplifiers, just like people do. This, let me see if I can find a picture of it that's clipped closer. Yeah. What I'm saying is guys, think of that. That's all they're doing with this. I want you to really think about what's inside your head. What's inside your head? What's inside your body? Your body is this. When you get down to it, all they're doing is taking all of your chakras, your brain wave. Let's take a look at this. What do you think that is? These are literally chakra, crown chakra, heart chakra. Again, the antennas replicate a lot of the human physiological processes right down to the same brain waves that you're emitting. And these things generate scalar waves. These things generate plasma fields and plasma beam bending and can do things with weather. And so can people. So yes, ETA, I agree. Yeah, you can. And I think that prayer does it. And I think that that's what it's doing. I think when people get together in a church, it's doing what HARP does. So yes, and then when they're inside a church or a temple or a mosque and I would say especially things that are designated as mosques and temples are do this more in old school churches, not as much as modern churches, but they all had minarets. And guys, minarets, I mean, wow, guys, you want to talk about energy transfer. The minarets that are in some of those those religious places are transmitters of energy too. This is something that I was reading in Uvarov's material also. God, I wish I could find that article. It's so brilliant. And I know I had it bookmarked someplace. So when I can actually have it ready in advance, I'll show it to you sometime. It's so cool. So. Yeah. Yeah. And, Tracy, Masons, they're not all one and the same, and that's why I think that I'm glad you said that, because I don't think that Freemasons get enough credit for doing good things. And they always have, their scapegoats. A lot of times they're always having people, talk shit about them and never actually say that they do good things. And they do a lot of great things, especially with what I'm talking about. Project Rainbow, a lot of the defense projects, they required Masons and the secret societies that are kind of close to that. They're not secret societies, but they are societies that encourage secrecy internally, as a means to, just prevent, what do you want to call it? Things from leaking. And you know what I'm saying, guys? If you think about it, like with timeline manipulation or people that are doing things that change time, or perception of time, or events within time potentially, then it seems almost like it would be a natural, association to be a part of, because outside of whatever you agree upon within, your working groups, career wise, this would involve things that you would have to do outside of that would involve similar secrets, and then a high level of integrity. So yeah, I'd say if your local lodges are definitely of the variety there of the non, Nazi infiltrated ones. It did seem to happen, not just in, guys, it wasn't really a US thing. That was global. The effort to infiltrate them in the 40s. And, you definitely want to judge them more lodge by lodge, person by person, and not as one overall organization. So if you have a good one in your area, then yeah, awesome. That's great. Yeah, exactly. They're not a secret society. I agree. That's a bad way to term it. So, but yeah, because the ones that are more open about it, they'll actually put the rings on and everything like that. I'm just telling you guys, like some of the cooler filmmakers that I know are helping out with these things, I think they're secret Masons. They won't tell you up front. They don't run around wearing Masonic rings, and they won't openly concede that they're Masons, probably, to most people. But you will see the ones that are, especially the comedic actors, nearly all of them participate in things that are very much Masonic traditions, and they just don't come right out and say it. Things like the Friars Club, a lot of times, is in the tradition of the Masons, and things like that. So anyways, this isn't really a discussion about that per se, but I wanted to make sure, since it was in the comments section there, that I addressed it. I tend to agree. I don't think that they should be scapegoated. It's just one of those common scapegoats, right? It's, the Jews do everything, the Freemasons do all these horrible things, that kind of thing. So I don't buy into it. Either one of them. I think that it's just a lot of scapegoating for the most part. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't have an answer for your question. Maybe. They, as much as any other group, I guess it just depends on what their history is and why they might be doing that. I know in my case, there's a whole lot of DNA tracking going on, because they just, I think, look, I mean, if I am in fact Rh negative and it wasn't divulged to me, then that would be a big reason to limit, who they put me with, especially when it comes to romantic relationships. They would completely try to restrict that and control it, because they would only want me being with people that are of a similar blood group, or one that's not. If they have really menacing ideas, they would tell you that you're one blood group, but then pair you with people of one that's not compatible, specifically so that you would have multiple problems with miscarriages or babies not being compatible with the mom. They're that sinister, guys, where they would hide something like that for a lifetime, and they could keep you in a restricted environment with doctors and everything. If you trust the people close to you, yeah. And they're all in intelligence circles, yeah. And then if they're also close to Department of Energy and the Human Genome Project, double yeah. Gabba, gabba, yeah. Any Ramones fans? Gabba, gabba, hey, hey. Too many weird things going on in my world, I'll tell you that. But I'm certain that whatever went on within these circles, that, look, am I certain 100%? No, but I have enough clues dropped in my path now where I know that I'm a part of it. There's no question about that. 99.9% sure that I'm a part of it. And so I'm just trying to be cool with it and just trust that. And so far it's been okay. I mean, you know, I get a little nervous sometimes, guys. I really don't like what they're doing to me financially right now. I want to be stable someplace where I'm not worried about whether or not, you know, I don't like having to think about that every 2 days or 3 days. I don't like it, but people do help me. And it always works out in the end, but I don't feel comfortable burdening people. And I really just want to get down to doing something meaningful. And I feel like most of that is done metaphysically. And I don't know how to explain that to people. Like, maybe, it's like you're trying to, like, you need to be in a church that doesn't exist, or a religious society maybe that doesn't exist. Not religious, but it's not that. To me, it's almost like what you need is a bioenergetic order of some sort of people that say, yeah, we all know what we've got inside us and going on. And we can be different people, but let's talk about what we collectively decide to manifest. And so to me, like, I just try to, like, find agreements with people where I say, okay, what do you have a problem with in the world? What's the main problem that you want to fix? And does the thing that I want to fix jive with what you want to fix? To me, it seemed like the one thing that we should all have agreed on a long time ago was human trafficking, child trafficking issues. Like, that should be something I think that, number one, to me, free will is everything. When you violate somebody's free will or rob them of their free will, to me, that's like the one thing that is unquestionably a crime. Everything else to me is a misdemeanor or a rule that got broken. But the real laws, the real universal law, is all about your will and your free will. And when they take that from you or attempt to remove you from, the ability to control your life independently and freely, that's a crime. And I think what I've learned inside my universe is that they acted like somebody, I guess, had some degree of accesses behind the scenes where they could literally turn me into somebody that was in one of these restricted environments, like a slave almost, but they made it invisible to me. And then I learned that they were doing this to a whole ton of people because of their genetics. And it's like you're in a gene seed bank without giving permission. And the way it's rigged is to be close to you and pretend that they are you and you are more like them, which is to say that if you have rare genetics, they don't want you getting the true protections behind the scenes and the access to all that. They're going to manage your protections by being you and stealing your genetics, unless you have a loud enough mouth or can get around enough to where people know that you really are the person that you say they are, and they can't get away with that anymore. That's what I did. And it's created problems because now people have to go like, I don't know who Gabe is. It's weird, guys. Do you understand that? I can't think of it. There's really nobody right now hardly that's willing to admit. I don't want to talk shit about them, guys. It's just weird that there used to be like a whole bunch of these people that like, hey, that's Gabe, I love him. And then it's like, well, you don't exist to me anymore. Just like that. And what was my big crime? I just revealed the truth. That's it, guys. I really did. Because I thought it was important, that it was bigger than just things that were individual to me or the people that were around me, that we as a collective owed some explanations if all these things happened close to our family. And I felt like, if nobody else was going to do it, then I needed to. That way, at least I spare those who don't know. And if those who didn't know are blaming me now for saying what I did, then you're just going to learn that you're wrong in the end. And I'll forgive you, but man, let me tell you something. I don't know what the hell's going on right now. I don't know why the hell you think that I'm a bad guy. If you're cool. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It seems to me like the things that I'm fighting would be like a no-brainer to get behind. That you'd want to end, child trafficking and human trafficking organizations. But hey, whatever, guys. That's not what tonight's presentation is about. It's about Montauk and human trafficking. Not human trafficking, but Montauk is sorry, guys. I don't want to talk about human trafficking. We're going to talk about Montauk, but it is kind of used, though, sometimes as code for that shit. So that's why it's like it's what pisses me off about all these topics, guys. Like on YouTube, there's a whole bunch of people who do talk about it, and then it's just like you're like, are you sure you're talking about it? Ciphered names and characters that are supposed to know everything about it that, have like a bazillion viewers. And you're like, are you sure you didn't just get created this year? How the hell have you existed the last 20 years? I've never heard of you. They're literally just populating the internet with these people over and over again. It's bizarre. So. Sorry, I got to crack my back. All right. Let me think here. I was going to show you some excerpts from this book. This one I had somebody trying to get me to read this for a long time, and because I'd already read Montauk Project. Hang on. Just to give you an idea, though, of some of the topics that he discusses, like he gets deep into the recording, like the wall of sound, like how certain types of things got created. But the really compelling thing is his whole history of Brookhaven Labs and Bell Labs and the things they were doing within the physics of music and notes and perception of sound relative to mind control and doing things with perceived reality within the recording industry. So you'll see like the names of these chapters, shifting realities, pyramid rock and the laser disc. I mean, really interesting material here, guys. But again, he has a kind of an alternative perspective on a lot of the histories that you typically find relative to some of these things. Yeah, so this is by Peter Moon, this forward part. Preston's music system was very much a focal point of his research into the paranormal, but as I interviewed him in order to write the Montauk Project, Experiments in Time, he never really linked the subject of music to Montauk. Nevertheless, I heard many stories about his experiences in the music business and his work with different artists. These anecdotes were told to me in bits and pieces throughout the years. The Montauk Project was basically a summary of a decade worth of research by Preston. It consisted of a scuttlebutt he had heard throughout his years in the defense industry, countless interviews conducted at Montauk, as well as research done with people involved in the project. The Montauk Project itself was put together as a result of human behavioral studies conducted secretly under the umbrella of Brookhaven Laboratories. These studies were done as a result of the Philadelphia experiment in 1943 when the Navy experimented with degaussing technology and sought to make a ship, the USS Eldridge, appear invisible to radar. The Navy denies this, but the subject matter is still highly classified and considered to be the forerunner of today's stealth technology. Not only was the USS Eldridge reported to have become invisible, but the sailors involved were hurled out of this dimension. Upon their return, some were embedded in the bulkheads and other fixtures of the ship, with others spontaneously combusting of suffering severe psychological trauma. Even if one does not accept the more sensational aspects of the Philadelphia experiment, there is absolutely no doubt about the fact that the sailors were exposed to non-ordinary electromagnetic fields as a result of the degaussing coils that were employed to demagnetize the hull. In order to first prevent negative effects on human beings, a massive study was eventually begun after the war at Brookhaven Laboratories in order to understand how human beings and the human consciousness relate to different electromagnetic fields. This research project also had at its disposal human behavioral studies conducted by the Nazis. Many of them were quite Gemison? I don't know what that means. Sorry. Gameson? I don't know. But they were empirical in nature and were as meticulous as only Germans can be. They provided considerable information about human reactions. It is no small irony that when Brookhaven Laboratories was erected in 1946, the location was selected was Yaphank, I don't know how you say that, home to the largest concentration of Nazis outside of Germany. Before the war, Yaphank sported an Adolf Hitler Boulevard with many other streets named after Goebbels, Göring, and the like. Many people of German descent worked at the lab as well, and there have always been questions about their loyalties. Not only did Brookhaven entertain top international scientists, many of whom were German, but it became the premier atomic and scientific research center in the world. Shortly thereafter, the National Security Act was passed and the CIA was brought into being. Covert connections between the Nazis and the U.S. were completely affirmed when Allen Dulles, the first director of the CIA, hired Reinhard Gehlen to set up working procedures of the CIA. Gehlen had served as a director of Nazi intelligence in Europe. Dulles also hired Ewan Cameron, the head of the American Psychiatric Association, to conduct mind control experiments under a program known as MKUltra. These are documented facts, and no one who honestly researches a subject will deny it. As the human mind was studied and sometimes quite brutally, all sorts of empirical observations were made. Just as the Nazis had their own occult bureau and researched the supernatural, so did the researchers at Brookhaven. Finally, after years of research, there were successes in integrating the human mind with computers. The experiments in mind control, although limited, were successful. Eventually, this clandestine research was considered to be potentially very dangerous, and the funding was denied. Nevertheless, great strides had been made in terms of technology, and secret forces carried forward, eventually moving the project to a decommissioned Air Force station at Montauk, New York. It was there that eyewitnesses say that the research reached its apex on August 12, 1983, when a full-scale hookup was made to the USS Eldridge in 1943, and time travel became a reality. The general pattern of this research is related in the Montauk Project experiments in time. Preston Nichols remembers entering the fold of the Montauk research when he became a paid employee of Brookhaven Labs in the late 1960s. But his first recollections occurred when he was having a family dinner that included his cousin and her husband. The husband mentioned that he had seen Preston at Montauk, yet Preston had no recollection of ever having been there. This resulted in a heated argument. Over the years, more people began to recognize Preston from Montauk and other associations he had no conscious memory of. Okay, guys, the reason why I'm telling you this is because this shit happens to me more than a little bit. It's happened to me several times over the last 5 years where somebody swears they saw me at a ship, or they saw me in some temple, or they saw me in some whatever, and I go, guys, I could not have even possibly been there. I was never, like, that never crossed my trajectory within history. I never had anything that brought me to that. But there's times where I could at least draw a correlation to where that person thought they saw me and somebody else that I knew was sometimes. But no, I've had this thing. And one time somebody even said, I know that guy. I saw him on the ship. And I'm like, what ship? I've never really been on a ship. I can't think of a time I ever took a cruise. At best, I've been on ferries, that would take you between like Seattle to like one of the islands. But that's as far as I go on any boats. I'm not a big boat person in general. So I don't know. But I've had things like that happen to me. And I'd be like, look, obviously you feel strongly about it, but I didn't experience that. It just, not a lot. And then sometimes these are people that are very gifted within astral plane, and they're just known as being people that are just they're willing more to speak about things that are more metaphysical in nature that they experience, where they feel strongly that I was there. And I don't doubt some of their sincerities, although some of them I think are bullshit artists. They're just trying to do it as a way to gain confidence or whatever. But no, others I trusted their sincerity. I can't verify it. That's all. So obviously Preston experienced something similar, and it doesn't surprise me, guys, because I've done some strange shit to my body with electromagnetic signals, just self-experimentation, Anyways, Preston soon realized that he had an entire life he knew nothing about. Memories were buried, including what appeared to be memories of other realities, which were elusive but nevertheless tangible in many respects. All of these experiences fostered Preston's research, which resulted in the book The Montauk Project. This pattern of uncovered memories is a primary reason why the music aspect of the Montauk Project was never dealt with in the earlier books. The connection was never completely made. He remembered being in the music business, and I knew something about it, but the working components of it and how it related to Montauk were overlooked by both of us. There was also another factor. Although I had suggested for years to Preston that he should do a book about his music experience, he was always reluctant. He said he had angered enough people with the Montauk Project that he thought this music book might be more aggravating to certain folks. Consequently, he had not yet relayed many anecdotes at all about various musicians and their bizarre behavior. Nevertheless, there was key information he was willing to release that will hopefully serve as a springboard to further research and understanding. Working with Preston on his book was not an easy task. For example, he gave me 4 separate times about 7 years apart when he first met his boyhood friend, Mark Harnell. Finally, I asked about his dad, Bob Nichols, if he remembered Mark. Bob remembered Mark raking leaves in their backyard as a youngster. By going over different information from different angles, we were able to arrive as accurate as a reputation as possible. Preston explained his disparities by telling me that he seems to live on at least 3 different timelines and that they get confused. He has appreciated this attempt to put his history into words because it straightens out his own memories. Preston is a genius. He is unsurpassed when it comes to understanding electromagnetic functions and all the technical details that go with it. That is verifiable in science and industry and also makes him an irritant to those who would seek to dismiss him as a mere crackpot or nut. He is also acknowledged in psychology, religion, and occultism and sees realms that regular human beings are cut off from. In esoteric terms, Preston occupies nonlinear space. This means that he is not operating in a consciousness he is operating in a consciousness that is not regulated by linear thought. Therefore, his memories and experiences do not always conform to linear applications. This book is an attempt, and certainly not a perfect one, to put his experiences into a linear reality. There are many controversial statements herein. Anyways, I won't necessarily go over all this, but I wanted you to kind of have a background on the guy. And then there's some really fascinating information in here about how you make certain recordings. Wow, look at this, guys. NBC Studio is on West 57th. How about weird, right? Let's see here. It's about ESP. Oh, shoot. There's a thing here, guys, I was going to tell you about that, like, had a whole thing about the way the magnetic coil pickup of the microphone does things. But the whole thing about Brookhaven is also good. So how much is the Brookhaven chapter? Yeah, let's talk about Brookhaven really quick, guys. I mean, are y'all familiar with Brookhaven? Those of you who don't know, Brookhaven is where we have our own CERN, basically. Alice is in Brookhaven. So if you ever want to know where something besides the CERN facility that's doing that is, over on the East Coast, you have something like CERN. Everybody loves to focus on CERN. They love to focus on Alice. Did you know Brookhaven has one just like it? It's doing the same experiment. So if you're overly focused on CERN, you're going to miss what's going on in your own backyard, especially here in the United States. And folks, and keep in mind here that this is the same lab that these guys tell you all have heavy Nazi connections. And guess what? Battelle, same people that manage the lab that's close to all of my family, Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, Department of Energy in Hanford, also manages Brookhaven. So if Brookhaven has all those troubling Nazi connections and a Battelle connection, I promise you guys, Hanford has all the same ones. Nazis. Okay? You just go out there, guys. Anytime you look any deeply into the Department of Energy Hanford's documentation, you're going to go, why does this look all Nazi'd up? Because it is. It's Nazi the hell up. Everything involving Department of Energy has tons of Nazi occultism embedded into it. It's a big part of how they manage electricity and what they know about electromagnetic fields. And binding actual tangible, like the way we all perceive reality. Those deep level groups there, they understand this, guys. That's why I'm giving you this, so that if I make this statement about, quote, Nazis in America, that people understand that they have a traceable route, that it's not like something we should just kind of go like, those Nazis. No, guys, like, you can find them. You got to see where they have their interests. And that's why I've always warned people, you're always looking at NASA, and you need to, but also look at the Department of Energy, because that's where they really did all the deep infrastructure hacks in America. And it's going to lead back to things like Alice and Brookhaven. Think this through, okay? One day, so this is from Preston Nichols' perspective, just so you know. Okay, this is him writing. He says, one day I was doing a recording for the Rolling Stones. I forget what recording we were doing, but I believe it was Jumping Jack Flash. Mick Jagger suddenly walked into the control room and said he wanted to talk to Little Buddha and see all of my recording equipment. He knew of my reputation as a recording engineer and considered me a fountain of good ideas. He said that every time I worked for the group, he learned something new. He usually knew what sound he wanted, and it was my job to produce it. On that day, he wanted to learn what secrets I had to share. Subsequently, I took him home so that he could see what I had. He talked a lot about the occult and procedures of sexual magic. He often used these techniques before recording. As things developed, I decided it would be a good idea to introduce Mick to the acoustics of the old Montauk Pavilion. It was called Coswell's Pavilion, and it was at Coswell's Beach, not too far from Dick Cavett house and the future home of Mark Hamill. We got permission to use the pavilion in order to record a couple of songs for one of the Stones' albums. Both of the songs, You Don't Always Get What You Want and Street Fighting Man, always utilized the choir of young boys from Montauk who showed up at the pavilion and sang. I have no idea where they came from. Mick even became enchanted with Montauk during the period and began to live there for long stretches of time. To this day, his picture can still be found in certain bars around the town. He expressed part of his affiliation with Montauk in a song entitled Memory Motel, which is the exact name of the motel on the main street in town. An interesting anecdote about the Memory Motel was told to me at a lecture by a woman from Montauk who said she suspected that room number 1 of the motel was a secret entrance to the underground. She had seen military personnel there, and the room always had something weird associated with it. As I recall, this was the room just to the north side of the bar. I told her that I tried to rent that room several times, but was always refused. I really do not know if Mick Jagger had any direct connection to the Montauk Project. My memories of him were of a regular and routine nature, although this interest in the occult and his strong attraction to Montauk and the Memory Motel will cause everyone, including myself, to wonder. His song Sympathy for the Devil is supposed to refer to Aleister Crowley. He has also produced low-budget videos which explore Satanism. What is interesting about this time period is that I had begun to work at Brookhaven Labs during my summer vacation from college. This was in 1968. As an engineer and scientist, I had signed up for a program whereby I could work with their particular accelerator. There were several other budding scientists who were similarly interested. This was a paid job, and I was sold a bill of goods that I was doing something very patriotic for the good of my country. Unfortunately for myself, I was not assigned to the particle accelerator work as I had hoped. Instead, they put me on human factor research. I was to set up electromagnetic fields of certain types and subject actual human beings to them. Behavioral scientists, including myself, would record the stress and reactions of the test subjects. Looking back, this research carried forward from the original Philadelphia experiment. I was being used on some level by characters and factors I knew very little about. As my work at Brookhaven occurred during my heyday at Bell Sound, I believe they hired me so that I could put thought forms on the recordings I was doing in the rock world. I do remember literally encoding thought forms into the music in what can best be called an electromagnetic telepathy of subtle energies. As the recordings were being transferred to the tapes, I concentrated on the heads of the tape recorder in order to place a thought form on the tapes. If you want to encode a thought form, all you have to do is listen to the music that is being copied and concentrate on the playback machine heavily. By grooving along on the music, but also concentrating on the thought form, you get a parametric impression on that tape of the thought form. We put thought forms into music mainly to make people respond. At the recording studio, I literally compressed thought forms that people responded to in particular ways. One of the most simple thought forms projected were to make certain rock groups popular. We simply wanted to put a thought form on the recording that you would want to hear it again. Once you heard the song over a transistor radio, the thought form would go out to buy the record and play it over and over again until it was worn out. Then you would go out and buy another record. This is how we sold so many records. In chapter 1, I alluded to the twist being popular due to a very esoteric principle in sound recording. There are actual two thought inputs into a sound system when a recording is made. This includes what could be termed the, quote, psychic input, unquote, of the musicians as well as that of the performer. When the performer stands in front of the microphone and sings, he projects a thought form into the coil or the capacitive element of that microphone. That capacitive element, the capacitor, basically consists of electronic plates with an insulator designed for the purpose of storing electrical potentials which can be reproduced at a distant point, such as a speaker. There's also an amplification process which amplifies the waveforms and eventually creates loud music at the receipt point, the audience. Sound waves are part of the electromagnetic spectrum. It is the electromagnetic function which is the key. Thought forms also make their own impingement on the electromagnetic background of the universe. For example, if you hear sound waves telling you that there is a sale at a department store, you have also acquired the thought form that the managers of the store wanted you to have. Sound waves themselves are generally more easily measurable and discernible than those waveforms produced by thought forms. In other words, the electromagnetic functions of thought forms are much more subtle and is indeed an esoteric subject in and of itself. But all of you can easily perceive how thought forms are carried by sound waves when you consider the prospect of hearing something you don't believe. For example, suppose you hear a politician say something inside of you, you can perceive that he is not telling the truth. It is not necessarily the sound itself which tips you off. The radio or sound system is actually projecting a duplication of what emanated from the original point. You just, quote, pick up on it. In actual fact, the thoughts you picked up on were the result of electromagnetic impulses. That to me is fascinating. The telepathic waveforms are subtle, less dense in comparison to what ordinary science would refer to as waveforms, but they are nevertheless present and can be monitored within the realm of the electromagnetic spectrum. As I said earlier, it is an esoteric science. We will go more into the technical details of how this can occur in the physical spectrum, but first it will be necessary to go into some of the background theory on metaphysics and the physics of music itself. And I'm not going to read that chapter, folks, but anyways, that's what I was going to share from Music of Time, because I thought that was like, I wanted that to be something that, because I talk about that in part 5 of the energetic series, just so you know. If you want to hear where that information bridges into what I talk about, I'm talking about very similar concepts in part 5 of energetics, okay? And this is where I get into sacrifice culture relative to recording media, what the common materials are that make the process that he just talked about possible. How can you transfer your thought forms the way he discussed over to the magnetic plate, transferring into the recording medium? I say it's absolutely a thing. I don't question it at all. I have magnetic tapes that I made when I was younger that I know this worked on, and I know it had an occult effect. I know it did. Me and my brother used to play around with portable recording things like tape recorders and microphones. And when we were younger, we were putting our voices on microphones and joking around. Like we would do like Star Wars, and we would take the 2 microphones and we would mess with the feedback when you put the microphones close to each other. So it'd be like, vroom, 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 vroom. And it's like, I'm Luke Skywalker, I'm Darth Vader, you know, and you just vroom, 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 vroom. Sounded just like them, but that's what we were doing. And so, you know, you think about something that's that silly and stupid, but what effect did it really have? I mean, we were placing our voices into a cassette that left an imprint. And to this day, those cassettes exist. They're just stored away in some box. They're probably not even playable because they're probably all eroded and stuck together at this point. But, you know, the thing is, though, we did make those tapes. They've existed since the 80s, and our imprints are on them. It's strange, right? When you think about what he just said, what does that really translate to at an occult level? It is really, really fascinating, especially when you start getting into the collective consciousness. Once you put the thought form out into the collective consciousness, then yeah, the thought forms of the people matter. And so what you've seen here is effectively, you know, an aggressive effort to, you know, control the thought form entities and who has amplified influence relative to thought forms. And this is a discussion I want to get deeper into. I'm glad that this tonight happened. I can't expand on it now because we'd have to do a whole nother 2.5 hours to really get into the whole thought form entities and all that. And I would like to have a more structured conversation about what a thought form entity is. But just think of it like that's literally your way of programming a plasma platelet inside your human body and then transmitting it outbound into the biofield. So think about everything you focus and concentrate on during intense prayer, meditation, and orgasm, especially, or trauma, if you want to go on the opposite. But I'm talking about when you're consciously programming. You can use trauma energy, but just remember, if you're going to use trauma energy, place your self into a positive orgone radiation state as quickly as possible, which is to say that you can be in energy locations that have negative energetics. I don't encourage it based on the research that I've done. It's a bad idea. But if you're very gifted and you're very I guess you have more power than the average person and you can transmute that energy. Then take the temporary trauma that you experience when you're there, say, wait a second, this is my opportunity. I don't feel good here right now. So how do I change this? This is when you begin to become stronger metaphysically. You can begin taking that very challenging location and saying, no, this is where I get to change the biofield. This is where I get to actually make an impact on the grid. Seriously, because it's like whisking DOR spectrum radiation, and you get to redefine it because you're not going to call DOR deadly. You're going to call it dormant, or you're going to call it dark. See, this is why I'm trying to have more conversations with people who get this. Even one-to-one conversations are important. What you do with your spectrum of energy, especially when it amplifies and goes all over the place. To me, it's like I see this as managing like towers. If you've got people out there that have reckless thought forms and they're broadcasting all over the place, then I understand why there's people that part of occult groups or secret societies like the Masons that are like going, watch what you're doing. You're thinking some fucked up shit and it's broadcasting everywhere. Your thoughts are going to become things. Yeah, guys. So, that there's some validity to that, right? We do have to balance how we feel against other things, and we can't be that stubborn. And I've worked on that. Believe me, I've had to work on it myself. So I try not to cut people off excessively when it comes to new ideas and accepting new information. But yeah, sometimes you really have to like also, turn the spigot off or narrow it down a little bit, because a lot of people will try to flood you with garbage. So, but well, listen, everybody, I'm going to cap this one off here in about a minute. So I want to thank you all for joining me here tonight. I really do appreciate all of the good comments, and it was a really good, a lot of things going on here that really helped spark a lot of new thoughts and things like that. But yeah, there's sorry I didn't answer everything, guys. I didn't mean to disregard some of these things here. I just don't have time to answer all of these questions in the limited box that I have here. Yeah. That's pretty trippy. Sounds like you're doing some interesting energy experiments there, Tracy. Fans and neodyne magnet. Really, that's, that people, it's, it's funny though. I do similar kinds of things like that because I just kind of want to see what happens, honestly. And a lot of times, like people that follow more standard, like sciences will kind of go like, whatever, dude. Oh, and then you go and do something like that. And it totally challenges different paradigms. And then what you're doing with your plasma field, man, I mean, is it a CERN generator? On what scale? I mean, I would argue amplification of human energy to what you're doing. I don't think it's that silly of an idea, to be honest with you. So personally, I think there's a little bit of genius in it, quite frankly. If I had to be thinking it through a little bit, sure. I've got a shit ton of neodymium magnets myself, but I don't know what to do with them. Good idea, though. I'll think about that. All right, folks, I'm going to sign off here and everything like that. Yeah, I appreciate you joining and everything like that. I'll contact details are below and everything like that. I'd appreciate any contributions you guys could send right now so I can get out of this F situation. And I'll be back tomorrow with more details and more new things. Good night.